Beneath the ancient stones of Jerusalem, a city that has witnessed countless empires rise and fall, lie secrets that have eluded even the most dedicated historians and explorers. For centuries, the narrow alleyways and sacred sites of this timeless metropolis have guarded cryptic treasures, each whispering fragments of stories from eras long past. Today, we're setting out on a journey through these hidden layers, a quest that will take us deep into the heart of one of the world's most enigmatic locations, where every stone, every artifact, holds a piece of a puzzle that has captivated human imagination for generations. There's something uniquely compelling about Jerusalem, a city that feels both ancient and alive, where the footsteps of prophets, kings, and conquerors seem to echo through the very air. It's a place where history isn't just studied, it's felt, and within its soil, astonishing finds continue to surface, challenging what we thought we knew and inviting us to reconsider the narratives we've long accepted. From mysterious inscriptions to ritual objects whose purposes remain unclear, these discoveries connect us to the people who walked these streets thousands of years ago, individuals whose lives, beliefs, and struggles shaped the world we inhabit today. In this video, we'll be uncovering 30 of the most cryptic items ever discovered in Old Jerusalem. Each of these artifacts tells its own story, some hint at forgotten ceremonies, others at conflicts lost to time, and a few that may even reshape our understanding of this iconic city's past. Together, we'll examine these relics not as distant historical footnotes, but as gateways into moments of drama, faith, and human ingenuity. Whether you're a history enthusiast or simply curious about the unknown, you're about to embark on an adventure that bridges centuries and sparks wonder. So settle in and let's explore the mysteries waiting just beneath the surface. Our journey begins not in a grand temple or a royal palace, but within a modest rock-cut tomb in the Siloam village, just outside the walls of the old city. It was here in the 1970s that an artifact emerged that would become one of the most debated and fascinating objects in biblical archaeology, the James Ossuary. An ossuary is a small, decorated chest, typically made of limestone, used in ancient Jewish burial customs to hold the bones of the deceased after the body had decomposed in a tomb. This particular box is unassuming at first glance, but its inscription is what sends a jolt through history. In delicate Aramaic script, it reads, "James, son of Joseph, brother of Jesus." The immediate implication is staggering, suggesting a direct physical connection to the family of Jesus of Nazareth. For many, this wasn't just an archaeological find, it was a potential touchstone to the very foundations of Christian faith. The initial analysis by experts seemed promising. Paleographers who study ancient writing styles dated the inscription's script to the 1st century, perfectly aligning with the time of those historical figures. The patina, that natural film of age that develops on stone, appeared ancient and consistent across both the box and the letters of the inscription, a key indicator of authenticity. However, the story quickly spiraled into a world of intrigue and suspicion. The ossuary's owner, an Israeli antiquities collector, brought it to public attention in 2002. Because it was not discovered in a controlled archaeological dig but rather surfaced on the private market, its provenance, its chain of ownership, was immediately murky. This lack of a clear archaeological context raised red flags. The Israel Antiquities Authority assembled a committee of experts to examine it, and their conclusion was explosive. They declared the inscription a modern forgery. They argued that while the ossuary itself was ancient, the second half of the inscription, the crucial words "brother of Jesus," was a later addition, skillfully carved and then artificially aged to match the rest of the box. This accusation led to one of the most dramatic courtroom dramas in the history of archaeology, a lengthy and sensational forgery trial. The central figure, the collector, was charged with fraud. Yet, after years of legal proceedings, the judge ultimately acquitted him, stating that while there was certainly reason for suspicion, the prosecution had not managed to prove its case beyond a reasonable doubt. This verdict did little to settle the academic debate. To this day, scholars remain fiercely divided. Some steadfastly maintain the inscription is genuine, a silent witness from the 1st century. Others point to chemical analyses suggesting the patina within the letters was manipulated with a cleverly concocted paste. This small stone box, therefore, is far more than a relic. It is a mirror reflecting our own deep desires to find tangible proof for our beliefs, and a sobering lesson in the complex interplay between faith, history, and the often shadowy world of the antiquities market. While the James Ossuary presents a modern mystery of authenticity, our next discovery transports us back over 2,700 years to a time when the Kingdom of Judah faced existential threats and prophetic voices echoed through the courts of kings. In the Ophel area just south of the Temple Mount, archaeologists meticulously sifted through ancient debris in 2015. Their painstaking work was rewarded with an astonishing find, a small, finger-sized piece of fired clay known as a bulla. These clay seals were used in antiquity to authenticate documents, pressed onto cords binding papyrus scrolls, and then imprinted with the signet ring of an official. This particular bulla, though damaged, revealed an inscription that sent a ripple of excitement through the world of biblical archaeology. It bears the name Yeshayahu, which is the Hebrew form of Isaiah, followed by the word Navi, meaning prophet. The full inscription reads, belonging to Isaiah the prophet. The immediate and profound implication is that this could be the personal seal of the biblical prophet Isaiah, a towering figure in Judeo-Christian tradition who counseled kings and whose writings are foundational to the Old Testament. Dating to the 8th century before the Common Era, the bulla originates from the exact period when Isaiah was active in Jerusalem, serving as a spiritual advisor to King Hezekiah. This was a tumultuous era marked by the Assyrian Empire's brutal campaign to conquer the region. The city of Jerusalem itself was besieged by the mighty Assyrian army under Sennacherib, an event corroborated by both the biblical account and Assyrian royal annals. To hold this tiny piece of clay is to feel a direct, tangible connection to that dramatic chapter in history. However, the academic community responded with what can best be described as cautious, electrified excitement. The bulla is not without its complications. A section of it is broken off. While the clear words Yeshayahu and Navi are present, some scholars suggest the missing fragment might have contained additional letters that could alter the interpretation. Perhaps it read, belonging to Isaiah, son of Navi, which would make Navi a patronymic or father's name rather than a title. Yet, the positioning of the words and their clear grammatical construction strongly supports the prophet translation. The bulla was discovered in the same archaeological layer and in close proximity to another seal belonging to King Hezekiah himself, a fact that powerfully strengthens the case for its authenticity and historical context. It seems entirely plausible that a prophet who served in the royal court would have his seal located near that of his king. This small piece of clay is far more significant than its size would suggest. If it genuinely belongs to the prophet Isaiah, it represents one of the most remarkable archaeological links ever made to a specific biblical personality. It moves the figure of Isaiah from the realm of purely theological text into the tangible, historical world. It doesn't prove the divine nature of his prophecies, but it does anchor his existence and his role in Jerusalem's royal administration in solid archaeological evidence. The discovery invites us to picture the very human act of Isaiah sealing a document, perhaps a scroll containing his own visions or a letter of counsel to the king, pressing his ring into the soft clay to leave this indelible mark, a mark that would survive empires, millennia, and the very destruction of the city around it, waiting silently to be found. While the Isaiah bulla offers a glimpse into the royal court of ancient Judah, Our next artifact catapults us forward into the era of Roman rule, bringing into sharp focus one of the most infamous figures in human history. In 1961, Italian archaeologists were excavating the ancient Roman theatre in Caesarea Maritima, a magnificent port city built by King Herod the Great on the Mediterranean coast. As they carefully turned over a limestone block that had been reused in a later set of stairs, they uncovered an inscription that would send a shockwave through the historical community. The text, though partially damaged, was unmistakably Latin and clearly legible. It named Pontius Pilate the Roman prefect of Judea, and it dedicated a structure called the Tiberium in honor of the Emperor Tiberius. This seemingly mundane building dedication is, in fact, the only known archaeological evidence of Pontius Pilate's existence in the entire world. For centuries, our knowledge of this man, whose name is eternally linked to the trial and crucifixion of Jesus of Nazareth, came solely from a handful of literary sources: the New Testament Gospels, the histories of Josephus, and a brief mention by the Roman historian Tacitus. This stone slab, now known as the Pontius Pilate inscription, transformed him from a literary character into a confirmed historical actor. It provides his official title, Prefect of Judea, a term the Gospels translate as governor. More importantly, it firmly anchors his administration in the grandiose Greco-Roman context of Caesarea Maritima, which served as the Roman provincial capital, not Jerusalem. The discovery profoundly reshapes our understanding of the man and his power. Pilate was not a distant, abstract ruler, but the highest Roman authority on the ground, responsible for maintaining order, collecting taxes, and administering justice in a notoriously volatile province. The inscription's dedication to Tiberius reveals Pilate's role as a loyal servant of the emperor, eager to demonstrate his piety and secure his political standing. This context is crucial for understanding the dynamics of Jesus' trial as described in the Gospels. Faced with a popular religious teacher being accused of claiming to be King of the Jews, a title that directly challenged Roman authority, Pilate's primary concern would have been political stability. A riot during the Passover holiday, when Jerusalem was swollen with pilgrims, was a provincial governor's worst nightmare. The inscription helps us see Pilate not as a one-dimensional villain, but as a pragmatic Roman official navigating complex local tensions, ultimately making a calculated decision to eliminate a potential source of unrest. This small piece of carved limestone does something extraordinary. It pulls a shadowy figure from the pages of Scripture and plants him firmly on the soil of history, governing a real province from a real city, his name forever etched in stone for the world to see. Moving from the solid historical certainty of the Pontius Pilate stone, we now turn to an artifact that seems to dissolve the very boundaries between history and prophecy, an object whose cryptic message continues to baffle scholars and ignite debate. Discovered on the east bank of the Dead Sea around the year 2000, the so-called Gabriel Revelation Stone, or the Vision of Gabriel, is a 3-foot-tall tablet of dark gray sandstone, entirely covered with 87 lines of Hebrew text written in ink. Unlike engravings carved into stone, this text is ink on stone, an exceptionally rare medium that has survived against all odds. It dates to the late 1st century before the Common Era, a period of immense social upheaval and fervent messianic expectation in Judea, just decades before the birth of Jesus. The text itself is a dramatic, first-person apocalyptic narrative, presented as a series of visions and dialogues delivered by the angel Gabriel. It speaks of bloody conflicts, a slain leader, and celestial signs, all set against a backdrop of imminent salvation and judgment. The most explosive and heavily debated passage involves a mysterious figure who is addressed directly. The text reads, "In 3 days you shall live, I, Gabriel, command you." This instruction, with its echo of resurrection after 3 days, is stunning. For centuries, the concept of a Messiah rising from the dead after 3 days has been a central, defining tenet of Christian theology, seemingly unique to the New Testament accounts of Jesus. Yet here it is, appearing in a purely Jewish text written perhaps 100 years before the Gospel stories were composed. This single phrase has sparked a firestorm of interpretation. Some scholars propose that the "you" being addressed is a historical Jewish leader of the time, perhaps a rebellious figure named Simon, who was killed by Herod's forces and whom some hoped would be miraculously returned to life. Others see it as a direct precursor to Christian belief, suggesting that the idea of a dying and rising Messiah was already circulating in certain Jewish mystical circles long before the crucifixion. This theory posits that the earliest followers of Jesus, who were all Jewish, would have been steeped in these existing ideas and used this framework to understand and explain the traumatic event of his death. In this light, the stone doesn't disprove Christian belief, but rather recontextualizes it, showing that its core concepts were part of a broader Jewish theological conversation about redemption and the end of days. Yet another layer of mystery involves the text's condition. Being written in ink, portions have faded or been damaged, leaving critical gaps in the narrative. Scholars must painstakingly reconstruct missing words and phrases, a process that is as much an art as a science and one that leaves room for significant disagreement. The very identity of the central messianic figure remains hotly contested. Is he a divine being, a heavenly prince, or an earthly king anointed by God? The stone refuses to give easy answers. It stands as a powerful testament to the rich diversity of Jewish thought in the Second Temple period, a world alive with competing ideas about how God would intervene in history. The Gabriel Revelation Stone challenges any simple narrative of religious history, forcing us to consider a far more complex and fascinating story of cross-pollinating beliefs and the human yearning for a divine savior in a world fraught with peril. Leaving behind the celestial visions of the Gabriel Stone, we now descend into the literal depths of Jerusalem, into a dark, winding passage carved by hand through solid rock, a testament to one of the most brilliant engineering feats of the ancient world. This is Hezekiah's tunnel, and within its damp stone walls, a brief but monumental inscription was discovered that perfectly captures a moment of human triumph from 2,700 years ago. The story of the Siloam Inscription begins with a looming threat. In the 8th century before the Common Era, the Assyrian war machine under King Sennacherib was systematically conquering the kingdoms of the region. The king of Judah, Hezekiah, knew his capital city of Jerusalem was next on the list. His most urgent problem was water. The main water source, the Gihon Spring, was located outside the city walls, making it dangerously vulnerable to a besieging army that could simply cut off the supply and wait for the city to surrender. Hezekiah's daring solution was both simple and audacious. He would hide the spring and redirect its water inside the city's fortified defenses. The biblical books of 2 Kings and 2 Chronicles describe this vast project, noting that the king stopped all the springs and the brook that flowed through the land, saying, "Why should the kings of Assyria come and find much water?" His masterstroke was the tunnel. 2 teams of miners were set to work, starting from opposite ends, one at the spring and another inside the city walls, and instructed to dig toward each other through over 1,700 feet of bedrock. The engineering challenge was staggering. They had to maintain a gentle, consistent downward slope so the water would flow, all while navigating by sound alone in utter darkness, with only hammers, chisels, and oil lamps to guide them. Miraculously, they succeeded, and at the point where the 2 teams finally broke through and met deep underground, they left a permanent record of their achievement. Carved into the rock wall of the tunnel, about 20 feet from the southern exit into the Pool of Siloam, is the Siloam Inscription. It's not a royal pronouncement. It doesn't bear the name of a king or a prophet. Instead, it is a vivid, first-person account written from the perspective of the foreman or the workers themselves. The text, in beautiful Paleo-Hebrew script, describes the final, dramatic moments of the dig. The tunneling was completed. And this was the manner of the tunneling, while the miners were still swinging their axes, each toward his fellow, and while there were still 3 cubits to be cut through, the voice of a man calling to his fellow was heard, for there was a resonance in the rock on the right and on the left. And on the day of the tunneling, the miners struck, each to meet his fellow, axe against axe. Then the water flowed from the spring to the pool for 1,200 cubits. The historical value of this text is immeasurable. It provides a stunningly precise corroboration of the biblical narrative, confirming not only the existence of the tunnel but the specific circumstances of its construction. It's a rare snapshot of everyday life and incredible skill, forever immortalizing the sound of picks getting closer and the shouts of celebration as the two teams connected. The inscription was discovered in 1880 by a local boy who was wading through the tunnel and literally stumbled upon it in the flickering light of his candle. Sadly, it was later chiseled out of the wall and taken to Istanbul, where it remains today in the Museum of the Ancient Orient, a removed chapter from its original, awe-inspiring context. To walk through Hezekiah's tunnel today with water still flowing around your ankles is to physically trace the path of this ancient panic and ingenuity. The Siloam Inscription transforms that walk from a simple tourist activity into a journey back in time, allowing you to hear the echo of axes and the triumphant voices of those ancient miners whose skill and determination ensured their city would live to fight another day. While Hezekiah's tunnel showcases grand, city-saving engineering, our next discovery demonstrates that some of history's most profound secrets are held not in massive stone monuments, but in objects small enough to be held in the palm of your hand. In 1979, archaeologist Gabriel was conducting a routine excavation of a series of burial caves at Ketef Hinnom, a site overlooking the Hinnom Valley just southwest of the old city walls. As his team carefully sifted through the soil in a burial repository, a chamber where bones and burial offerings were collected over centuries to make room for new interments, they found something extraordinary. Among the pottery, arrowheads and jewelry were 2 tiny, rolled-up sheets of silver, each no larger than a postage stamp when unrolled. They were so crushed and brittle with age that it took 3 full years of meticulous conservation work just to carefully uncurl them enough to see what was written inside. These artifacts, now known as the Ketef Hinnom amulets, are among the most significant biblical discoveries ever made. Using advanced photographic technology to enhance the faint, minuscule script, scholars were astonished to find they contained inscriptions. And not just any inscriptions, these were the earliest known written fragments of texts that would later become part of the Hebrew Bible. The words, delicately scratched into the silver foil, are a version of the priestly benediction from the book of Numbers, chapter 6. "The Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make his face shine on you and be gracious to you. The Lord turn his face toward you and give you peace." This was a powerful blessing, one used by priests in the Jerusalem temple and still recited in Jewish and Christian services to this very day. What makes these amulets so revolutionary is their date. Through careful analysis of the pottery, artifacts, and the script's paleography, the style of the ancient lettering, they were firmly dated to the late 7th or early 6th century before the Common Era, around the year 600. This was a period just before the catastrophic Babylonian conquest of Jerusalem, which resulted in the destruction of the temple and the exile of the city's elite to Babylon. This dating is absolutely critical because it pushes the timeline for the written composition of the Torah, the first 5 books of the Bible, back by centuries. For a long time, a school of thought known as the documentary hypothesis argued that much of the Torah, including the Book of Numbers, was compiled much later, during or after the Babylonian exile in the 5th century. The Ketef Hinnom amulets shatter that assumption. They prove that this specific biblical text was not only already written down but was so well known and considered so sacred that it was being used in personal, devotional objects a full 400 years before the famous Dead Sea Scrolls. Their function is equally fascinating. These were not pages from a scroll, they were amulets rolled up and most likely worn on a string around the neck as a form of spiritual protection. The benediction itself is a prayer for divine favor and safeguarding, making it a perfect text for a personal charm meant to invoke God's blessing and shield the wearer from harm. They offer a breathtakingly intimate window into the personal faith of an ordinary individual, or perhaps a wealthy one given the value of silver, living in Jerusalem at the dawn of one of its most traumatic periods. In a time of looming political chaos and violence, someone sought comfort and protection by carrying these words from Scripture close to their heart. This transforms our understanding of ancient Judaism from a purely temple-centric religion into one where personal piety and the written word also held immense power. The Ketef Hinnom amulets are a quiet but monumental testament to faith, demonstrating that the words of the Bible were not just grand liturgical pronouncements made by priests in a splendid temple, but were also whispered prayers carried as a source of hope and strength by everyday people facing an uncertain and frightening world. This next artifact offers a remarkably different perspective on ancient Jerusalem, shifting our focus from the grand narratives of kings and prophets to the quiet, devout life of a local community. In 1913, during excavations near the Pool of Siloam at the foot of the City of David, archaeologists unearthed a slab of white limestone inscribed with 7 elegant lines of Greek text. This is the Theodotus inscription, and while it may seem like a simple dedication plaque, its words provide an incredibly rare and intimate look into the spiritual and social world of Jewish life in Jerusalem during the turbulent first century of the Common Era, just decades before the city's catastrophic destruction by the Romans. The inscription reads, "Theodotus, son of Vetinus, priest and archysynagogos, built the synagogue for the reading of the law and the teaching of the commandments, and the guest house and the rooms and the water, supplies for the lodging of those who have need from abroad." Every part of this declaration is packed with significance. Theodotus, bearing a Greek name but identified as a priest and an archysynagogos, a leader of the synagogue, embodies the complex cultural tapestry of the time. His father's name, Vetinus, is Roman, suggesting a family that was thoroughly integrated into the wider Greco-Roman world while maintaining a deep and public commitment to their Jewish faith and its practices. This single stone slab is our oldest archaeological evidence for the existence of a synagogue in Jerusalem during the Second Temple period. This fact is profoundly important. For a long time, scholars debated whether synagogues, as distinct institutions for prayer and Torah study, even existed in the city, while the magnificent Herodian temple still stood as the undeniable center of Jewish worship. The Theodotus inscription settles that debate conclusively. It reveals a religious landscape that was more diverse and decentralized than we might have imagined. While animal sacrifices and grand festivals were the domain of the temple priesthood, the synagogue served a different, more communal purpose. It was a place for education, for the public reading and interpretation of the Torah, and for upholding the commandments in daily life. The inscription highlights that the core functions of Jewish communal life, learning and teaching, were already established in these local institutions, a model that would become the bedrock of Jewish survival after the temple was gone. Perhaps the most touching detail is the explicit mention of the guest house and water installations for travelers. Jerusalem was a major pilgrimage destination, with Jews from across the Roman Empire and beyond journeying to the city for the 3 annual festivals. Theodotus's synagogue provided a vital service, offering lodging and hospitality to these foreign visitors, likely fellow Jews from the diaspora who spoke Greek and would have felt at home in this particular congregation. This transforms the building from a simple house of study into a community center, a place of welcome and practical charity. It speaks to a deep-seated value of hospitality, a tangible expression of faith that extended beyond ritual and into the realm of social obligation and kindness. The Theodotus inscription, therefore, is far more than a building marker. It is a window into a vibrant, compassionate community, led by a man who used his own resources to support both the spiritual and physical needs of his people, creating a lasting legacy of faith and fellowship in the very shadow of the great temple. High atop the massive retaining wall of the Temple Mount, at its southwest corner, a priest would have stood with a silver trumpet in his hands, looking out over the entire city of Jerusalem spread below him. His role was one of sacred timing, and his instrument was the voice of the community, marking the rhythms of holy time for every person in the city. For centuries, this dramatic ritual was repeated week after week, festival after festival, until the cataclysm of the Roman destruction in the year 70. And for centuries, this practice was known only from ancient texts. That changed in 1970 when an Israeli archaeologist named Benjamin Mazar made a stunning discovery amidst the rubble at the very base of that same southwest corner. There, lying amid the stones that had been toppled by the Roman legions, was a carved limestone block. It was a piece of the pinnacle of the Temple Mount wall itself, and it bore a profound and unambiguous inscription in classic Hebrew letters, "To the place of trumpeting." This stone block is a masterpiece of understated power. It is not a grand monument, it is a directional sign, a piece of sacred architecture. The complete inscription reads, "To the place of trumpeting to declare." The final word is cut off, but scholars universally agree it would have completed the phrase found in the writings of the historian Josephus, "to declare the Sabbath." The function of this spot is described vividly in ancient sources. According to the Mishnah, the codification of Jewish oral law, priests would stand at the highest point of the temple complex to sound the shofar, the ram's horn, on the eve of the Sabbath. But for announcing the actual commencement and conclusion of the Sabbath and festivals, they used 2 silver trumpets. The priest would turn to the west and blow toward the upper city, where the wealthy and priestly families lived, then to the north to signal the bustling lower market, to the east for the temple courts themselves, and finally to the south toward the more common residential areas. With each blast, the entire city, from the highest official to the most humble laborer, would know precisely when to cease their work and when to begin their rest, when to gather and when to celebrate. The discovery of this stone does something extraordinary. It transforms a written description into a tangible, physical location. We can now point to the exact corner, see the very stone that marked the spot, and understand the precise mechanics of this ancient public timekeeping system. But the story of this artifact is also a story of violent finality. The stone was found shattered among the massive Herodian ashlars that the Roman soldiers had pried from the top of the wall and hurled down onto the streets below during the brutal sack of the city. It didn't just fall, it was thrown down in an act of deliberate desecration and military engineering, intended to breach the defenses and demoralize the remaining Jewish rebels. The fact that it survived largely intact, buried for 19 centuries, is itself a minor miracle. Holding this stone, or even seeing it today in the Israel Museum, is to hold a piece of that pivotal moment in time. It represents the last trumpet blast that was never sounded, the Sabbath that was not declared because the city was engulfed in flames and its priests slain. It marks the abrupt end of a centuries-old tradition, a rhythm of life that was utterly silenced. The Trumpeting Place inscription is therefore a dual symbol. It is a vibrant testament to the highly organized, deeply spiritual communal life of ancient Jerusalem during the height of the Second Temple period, a life governed by faith and shared ritual. And simultaneously, it is a stark, silent witness to the devastating force that brought that entire world crashing down, its fall from the wall mirroring the fall of the city itself. It is a monument to both order and chaos, to sacred time and its tragic interruption. From the sacred marker of the Trumpeting Place, a stone that witnessed the city's final moments, we now turn to artifacts that capture the violent chaos of an earlier, equally catastrophic destruction. Our journey takes us to the Jewish quarter of today's Old City, where, buried in a layer of ash and debris, archaeologists uncovered a chilling time capsule from the Babylonian siege of Jerusalem in 586 before the Common Era. It was not a single grand artifact, but a grim collection, a cluster of bronze and iron arrowheads found lodged in the burnt remains of an Israelite house. These were not carefully stored munitions. They were spent, their tips bent and twisted from the force of impact, having found their mark in wood, stone, and flesh. They are the silent, brutal shrapnel of a city's final, desperate hours. To understand the profound weight of this discovery, we must step back into that terrifying historical moment. The mighty Neo-Babylonian Empire, under the command of King Nebuchadnezzar II, was the undisputed superpower of the ancient Near East. The small kingdom of Judah and its capital Jerusalem had become a rebellious vassal state. After a previous, less destructive siege a decade earlier, the Judean king Zedekiah made a fateful gamble by aligning with Egypt and rebelling against Babylonian authority. It was a catastrophic miscalculation. Nebuchadnezzar's response was swift, brutal, and absolute. His vast army marched on Jerusalem, laid siege to it, and for 18 long months encircled the city, slowly starving its inhabitants and pounding its defenses. The biblical books of Jeremiah and 2 Kings provide a harrowing, eyewitness-level account of the suffering inside the walls. The desperate search for food, the streets filled with the dead, the eventual breach of the city walls, and the horrific aftermath that saw the city, and most importantly, Solomon's temple, utterly razed to the ground. For centuries, this was a story told only through texts. The discovery of these arrowheads transforms that story from a historical narrative into an archaeological reality. Each one is a physical witness to the ferocity of the Babylonian assault. The variety is telling. The sleek, three-winged bronze arrowheads are typically Canaanite or Israelite in design, likely fired from the walls by the city's defenders. The heavier iron arrowheads with their simpler leaf-shaped design are classic Babylonian issue, shot into the city by the invading army's archers. Finding them together in a destruction layer thick with ash tells a vivid story of urban combat. This was not a battle on an open field. It was fought house to house, street by street, after the Babylonians had broken through the outer defenses. The house where they were found was on the front line. We can almost hear the whistle of arrows, the shouts of soldiers, and the crackle of fire as the city burned around its doomed inhabitants. These arrowheads are the smoking gun of the Babylonian conquest, providing undeniable physical proof that corroborates the biblical record of a violent, fiery end for the city and the First Temple. They force us to confront the human cost of that destruction, moving beyond the names of kings and emperors to the stark reality of ancient warfare, where ordinary people sheltered in their homes as a storm of bronze and iron rained down upon them, forever sealing their fate and changing the course of history. For centuries, the brutal Roman practice of crucifixion has been detailed in historical texts and artistic depictions, but physical evidence of this terrifying form of execution has been vanishingly rare. This is largely by design. Crucifixion was a punishment intended not just to kill, but to utterly obliterate a person's dignity and memory. Victims were typically left on their crosses to be consumed by scavengers, and the crude iron nails used to affix them were thought to hold powerful magical properties, often collected as amulets or simply discarded. For archaeologists, finding a nail still lodged in the bone of a crucifixion victim was considered almost impossible, a holy grail of biblical archaeology. Then, in 1968, construction workers in a neighborhood just north of the Old City, in an area known as Jivat HaMivtah, accidentally uncovered a Jewish tomb dating to the 1st century of the Common Era. Inside one of the stone ossuaries, the bone box used for secondary burial, they made a ghastly and groundbreaking discovery: the skeletal remains of a young man named Yehohanan ben Hakol. And fused to his right heel bone was a single, thick iron nail. The finding sent shockwaves through the academic world. Here was the first, and still, to this day, the only archaeological evidence of a Roman crucifixion victim ever discovered. The nail was about 4.5 inches long and had been driven horizontally through the side of the man's heel. Crucially, a small piece of acacia wood was still wedged between the nail's head and the bone, a fragment of the olive wood upright post from the cross itself. This single, chilling detail confirms the mechanics of the execution. Yehohanan's heels were not nailed to the front of the cross, as is so commonly depicted in religious art. Instead, his feet were positioned on either side of the vertical beam, and the large iron nail was hammered through both heels at once, pinning them directly to the wood. This method would have been excruciatingly effective, securely fastening the victim to the cross while simultaneously severing the large plantar nerves in the foot, creating waves of burning, electric pain. The condition of the skeleton tells a broader, more horrifying story. Yehohanan's leg bones, specifically his tibiae, show clear signs of fracturing. This has led some researchers to suggest he may have been a victim of the practice known as crurifragium, the breaking of the legs, which is described in the New Testament Gospels as a method used by Roman soldiers to hasten the death of crucifixion victims. Unable to push themselves up to take a breath, suffocation would quickly follow. However, the nail still lodged in his heel proves he was not removed from the cross to have his legs broken. The nail would have been extracted first. A more likely explanation is that the fractures occurred as he struggled violently against his restraints, or during the rough, haphazard process of taking his body down from the cross after he had died. This grim discovery profoundly illuminates the historical context of the most famous crucifixion in history, that of Jesus of Nazareth. For the first time, archaeology provided a tangible, physical model of how this punishment was actually carried out on a Jewish man in Roman-occupied Judea during the exact same time period. It confirms the historical accuracy of the Gospel accounts in their broader details, while simultaneously challenging some of the traditional artistic interpretations that have shaped our vision of the event for 2,000 years. The image of nails through the palms of the hands, for instance, is now widely considered anatomically implausible. The weight of the body would simply tear through the soft tissue. It is far more likely that nails were driven through the wrists between the radius and ulna bones, or just below, where a strong cluster of bones could support the body's weight. The heel bone, or calcaneum, is the largest bone in the foot, and the nail found in Yehohanan's remains shows the Romans targeted the strongest points available to ensure the victim remained securely fastened. Yehohanan ben Hakol was not a religious figure. His name, inscribed on the ossuary, suggests he was likely a common criminal or perhaps a political rebel. His death was one of thousands, a brutal public spectacle meant to deter others from challenging Roman authority. Yet his remains, preserved by chance and Jewish burial custom, have granted him an unintended legacy. He serves as a silent, powerful witness to the sheer, horrifying brutality of the Roman penal system. His story forces us to look beyond theological symbolism and confront the raw, physical reality of crucifixion. The searing pain of iron tearing through flesh and bone, the desperate struggle for air, and the ultimate, humiliating erasure that was intended to be its final result. In doing so, this one anonymous man's skeleton provides our most direct, visceral link to understanding the physical suffering that defined the end of Jesus' life, grounding a story of profound faith in the harsh, unforgiving soil of history. Nestled deep beneath the vaulted ceilings and ancient stonework of the Armenian Cathedral of St. James in Jerusalem's Armenian Quarter lies a secret world, a stunningly preserved mosaic floor that completely upends our simplistic notions of the Byzantine era as a time of rigid, uniform Christianity. Discovered accidentally during renovations in the late 1960s, this extraordinary work of art dates to the 6th century of the Common Era, a period when Jerusalem was a vibrant center of Byzantine Christian power and pilgrimage. But rather than depicting standard biblical scenes of saints or apostles, the mosaic presents a dazzling and perplexing array of imagery. A vibrant celestial circle featuring the 12 signs of the zodiac, each figure rendered with exquisite detail and accompanied by their name in Greek. At first glance, the presence of such overtly pagan symbolism in one of Christianity's most important cathedrals seems like a profound contradiction. The zodiac, after all, has its roots in Babylonian astronomy and Greek mythology, systems of belief that the early church fathers vigorously condemned as idolatrous superstition. Yet here it is, laid out in the heart of a sacred space. The key to understanding this paradox lies in the mosaic's central figure. The zodiac ring encircles a powerful image of a man driving a chariot pulled by 4 horses, a clear representation of Helios, the Greek sun god. To the casual observer, this would seem to be the most blatant pagan element of all. But for the Byzantine Christians who commissioned this floor, this image was almost certainly not seen as Helios at all. They would have interpreted this figure as a symbolic representation of Christ himself, the Son of Righteousness mentioned in the book of Malachi, who brings light and salvation to the world, triumphantly guiding the chariot of the cosmos. This wasn't an act of syncretism or hidden pagan belief. It was a common early Christian artistic strategy known as interpretatio Christiana, the Christian reinterpretation of pre-existing pagan motifs. The artists and theologians of the time were masters of symbolic language. They took familiar images from the dominant Greco-Roman culture that surrounded them and infused them with new Christian meaning. The zodiac signs, which had long been associated with the passage of time and the seasons, were reimagined to symbolize God's divine order and the harmonious cosmos he created. Each sign could also be linked to the 12 months of the year, and by extension to the cycle of Christian liturgical festivals that populated the calendar. This mosaic, therefore, is not a rejection of Christian doctrine but a sophisticated visual sermon, a cosmological map that asserts Christ's dominion over all of creation, including time, the seasons, and the very stars themselves. The floor's location adds another rich layer to its story. It wasn't originally part of the current cathedral. It was the lavish floor of a much earlier, perhaps private, devotional chapel or a wealthy patron's villa that stood on this spot before the cathedral was built over it centuries later. The use of Greek rather than Armenian or Latin for the inscriptions is also highly telling. It speaks to the complex cultural tapestry of 6th century Jerusalem. Greek was the language of the Byzantine imperial administration and of high theology, but it was also the common lingua franca of the Eastern Mediterranean, used by scholars, merchants, and artists of all backgrounds. This mosaic is a physical testament to that world, a Hellenistic cultural foundation layered with Christian belief, created by artists who were inheritors of a classical tradition that they were skillfully adapting for a new faith and a new era. Walking on this mosaic, which remains in its original place beneath a modern trapdoor in the cathedral floor, is to step directly into the imaginative and intellectual world of late antiquity, a time when faith, science, and art were not yet separate spheres but were woven together into a single, magnificent tapestry of meaning. While the mosaic beneath St. James Cathedral reveals a world of symbolic complexity, our next discovery presents a message of stark, unambiguous clarity, carved in stone to be understood by all who approach Judaism's most sacred site. In 1871, during excavations near the Temple Mount, French archaeologist Charles Clermont-Ganneau uncovered a fractured limestone block. Reassembled, it revealed a proclamation in clean, elegant Greek letters. This was the temple warning inscription, and its text was a chilling deterrent. No foreigner is to enter within the balustrade and forecourt around the sanctuary. Whoever is caught will have himself to blame for his death which will follow. This was not a mere suggestion or a polite notice. It was a deadly serious legal and religious boundary marker. The balustrade referred to a low, ornate stone fence, known in Greek as the soreg, that surrounded the inner sanctums of Herod's temple, the court of the Israelites and the court of the priests. Beyond this barrier was the holy territory where only Jews who had undergone ritual purification could tread. For a non-Jew, a Gentile, to cross this line was considered a desecration of the highest order, a violation of divine law so severe that it carried the ultimate penalty. The inscription's blunt final phrase, "death which will follow," leaves no room for ambiguity. Enforcement was not a matter for a trial or debate. It was immediate and lethal. The historical context for this harsh rule is deeply rooted in the Jewish concept of ritual purity. The temple was believed to be the literal dwelling place of God's presence on earth, and maintaining its holiness required strict separation from anything defined as impure. While Gentiles were welcome to worship the God of Israel and offer sacrifices, they were permitted in the massive outer courtyard, which became known as the Court of the Gentiles. They were categorically barred from the areas reserved for the covenantal people. This wasn't primarily about ethnic prejudice. It was a theological firewall designed to protect the sanctity of the space from ritual impurity, which Gentiles, by virtue of not following Jewish law, would inherently carry. The fact that this warning was written in Greek, not Hebrew or Latin, is profoundly significant. Greek was the international language of the Eastern Roman Empire, the lingua franca of travelers, merchants, and pilgrims from across the Mediterranean world. Jerusalem during the 1st century was a bustling multicultural city, teeming with visitors who had come to admire Herod's magnificent building project, which was considered one of the architectural wonders of the ancient world. The inscription was placed at regular intervals along the soreg fence, positioned precisely for these non-Jewish tourists and devotees of other gods. It was a necessary public announcement, a way to prevent accidental and fatal transgressions by people unfamiliar with the local religious laws. This stone slab brings a startling tangibility to a well-known event from the New Testament. In the Acts of the Apostles, the Apostle Paul is nearly murdered by an angry mob in the temple courts based on a false accusation. The crowd seizes him, shouting, "Men of Israel, help!" This is the man who teaches everyone everywhere against our people and our law and this place. What's more, he has brought Greeks into the temple and defiled this holy place. They specifically claimed they had seen a Gentile, Trophimus the Ephesian, with Paul inside the inner courts. Whether the accusation was true or not, the very fact that it was used as the spark for a riot that required Roman troops to quell demonstrates the explosive power of this religious boundary. The temple warning inscription was the legal and religious basis for that mob's fury. For us today, this artifact does more than just confirm a biblical account. It allows us to hear the exact terms of the law that Paul was accused of breaking. We can stand before this stone in a museum and read the very words that define the limits of inclusion and the terrifying cost of trespass in the world of the Second Temple, a powerful monument to the intense, fervent, and sometimes dangerous devotion that defined ancient Jerusalem. Leaving behind the grim evidence of arrowheads and shattered homes, we now turn to a monument of foresight and resilience, a colossal structure that speaks not of a city's fall, but of its fierce determination to survive. In the 1970s, as archaeologists worked to rebuild the modern Jewish quarter after the 1967 war, they made a discovery so massive it literally could not be ignored. As they dug down through the layers, they hit a wall, but this was no ordinary wall. It was a defensive barrier of staggering proportions, 23 feet thick in places, constructed from enormous, rough-hewn stones. This was the broad wall, and its unearthing provided breathtaking physical proof of one of the most dramatic stories of preparation and deliverance in the entire Hebrew Bible. The biblical narrative in the books of 2 Kings and 2 Chronicles tells us that as the terrifying might of the Assyrian Empire advanced under King Sennacherib, King Hezekiah of Judah launched an unprecedented building project. The text states he saw that Sennacherib had come intent on making war against Jerusalem, and so he worked hard repairing all the broken sections of the wall and building towers on it. He built another wall outside that one and reinforced the terraces of the city of David. For a long time, scholars debated the scale and even the location of this project. The discovery of the broad wall settled that debate with monumental finality. Here was the physical manifestation of Hezekiah's other wall, a desperate and brilliant attempt to fortify the city against the most powerful army the world had ever seen. The construction of this wall tells a story of both incredible engineering and profound social upheaval. To build something this massive so quickly, Hezekiah's engineers incorporated the outer walls of existing buildings into the new defensive line. But more importantly, the wall's path reveals a stunning expansion of the city's boundaries. Prior to Hezekiah's reign, Jerusalem was largely confined to the narrow ridge of the city of David and the Temple Mount. The broad wall, however, was built to enclose the western hill, a vast new area that effectively tripled the size of the fortified city. This was a strategic masterstroke. The Assyrian invasion had triggered a massive wave of refugees from the surrounding countryside of Judah, all fleeing to the perceived safety of the capital. The city's population exploded virtually overnight. The new wall was built specifically to protect these desperate refugees and the new neighborhoods that had sprouted up to house them. Walking along the excavated sections of the wall today, one can still see the sheer, intimidating scale of it. 23 feet wide is not just a wall, it's a fortress in itself, wide enough for defenders to move along the top, rappelling ladders and raining projectiles down on any attacker. It was a clear statement to Sennacherib's approaching army. Jerusalem would not be taken easily. The archaeological evidence confirms the biblical timeline perfectly. Pottery found in the houses that were demolished to make way for the wall's construction, and in the new houses built against its inner face, all date squarely to the late 8th century before the Common Era, the exact time of Hezekiah's reign. The ultimate success of this frantic preparation is etched into history. The Assyrian annals themselves, found in Sennacherib's palace at Nineveh, boast of conquering 46 fortified cities of Judah and trapping Hezekiah in Jerusalem like a bird in a cage. But they conspicuously fail to record the actual capture of the city. The biblical account, supported by the historian Herodotus, attributes the salvation of Jerusalem to a divine plague that struck the Assyrian camp. Whatever the cause, the Assyrian army withdrew and Jerusalem was spared. The broad wall is the silent stone witness to that miraculous deliverance. It stands as a testament to a king's desperate gamble, a city's collective effort, and an event that would forever cement Jerusalem's identity as the divinely protected heart of the Jewish people. It is a monument to a crisis successfully averted, a moment when human ingenuity and faith, literally set in stone, managed to defy the greatest empire on earth. Tucked away in the bustling modern landscape of Jerusalem, just outside the old city walls near the Dung Gate, lies an unassuming expanse of pavement known as the Javoti parking lot. For decades, it was a place for cars and buses, a thoroughly modern convenience. But beneath the asphalt, archaeologists from the Israel Antiquities Authority uncovered a time capsule of pure panic from the 7th century. Their excavation revealed the ruins of a wealthy Byzantine-era mansion, and within its stone walls, hidden in a foundation crevice, was a breathtaking treasure, a hoard of 264 gold coins, a large gold medallion etched with a menorah, a shofar, and a Torah scroll, and a pair of magnificent gold earrings. This wasn't a formal deposit or a ritual offering. This was a fortune in precious metal, hurriedly stuffed into a hiding place and then abandoned forever. To understand the desperate act that created this hidden cache, we must travel back to the year 614, a period of seismic shift in the ancient world. The Eastern Roman or Byzantine Empire had controlled Jerusalem for nearly 300 years, enforcing Orthodox Christianity and building magnificent churches like the Holy Sepulchre. But a new superpower had exploded onto the scene from the east, the Sasanian Persian Empire. In 614, their armies swept into the region, laying siege to Jerusalem with a ferocity that rivaled the ancient Babylonians and Romans. The ensuing sack of the city was one of the most brutal in its long history. Contemporary accounts describe widespread slaughter, the burning of churches, and the capture of tens of thousands of inhabitants. The most sacred relic in Christendom, the True Cross, was seized as a prize and carried off to the Persian capital. The owner of this treasure was almost certainly a wealthy Jewish individual or family living in Jerusalem at this tumultuous time. The Byzantine period had been marked by often harsh Christian rule over the city's Jewish population, who were frequently marginalized and oppressed. Interestingly, when the Persian armies arrived, they were initially seen by many Jews as liberators from Christian domination. Some Jewish communities even aided the Persian war effort. This context makes the imagery on the medallion absolutely fascinating. It features the classic symbols of Jewish faith, the seven-branched menorah, the ram's horn shofar, and a Torah scroll iconography that had been suppressed under Byzantine rule. For its owner, this treasure may have represented not just wealth, but a proud reclamation of religious identity under new and hopefully more tolerant Persian masters. But the hope was short-lived. The chaos of the Persian conquest was evidently so sudden and so violent that even those who may have welcomed the invaders found themselves in immediate mortal danger. We can vividly imagine the scene, the roar of fire and the clash of weapons drawing nearer, the shouts of soldiers in the streets. The owner of this house, confronted with the imminent threat of looting or death, faced a terrible choice. They could not flee carrying such conspicuous wealth without becoming a target, so they made a split-second decision. They gathered their most valuable portable possessions, their life savings in gold coins, their most precious religious heirlooms, and shoved them into a deep, dark crack in the foundation of their own home, intending to retrieve them when the danger passed. It was an act of pure, desperate faith in the future. That future never came. For reasons we can only speculate, the owner never returned. Perhaps they were killed in the slaughter. Perhaps they were among the thousands taken captive and dragged into exile, never to see their home again. The treasure remained exactly where it was left, silently gathering dust as the house above it collapsed into rubble, as new layers of history were built over it, and as centuries turned into millennia. Its discovery 1,300 years later provides a heart-wrenchingly intimate snapshot of a single moment of terror. This isn't the story of a king or a prophet. It's the story of an ordinary person or family caught in the grinding gears of history. The Javati Hoard is a frozen moment of crisis, a silent scream rendered in gold, reminding us that behind every great historical event, every conquest and sack of a city, are countless individual human tragedies, stories of lives upended and futures stolen, all waiting silently beneath the pavement to be found. Following the catastrophic destruction of the Second Temple in the year 70, the landscape of Jerusalem was transformed from the heart of Jewish spiritual life into a permanent Roman military garrison. For centuries after this decisive victory, the evidence of this occupation was not just written in the histories of Josephus, but stamped into the very fabric of the city in the most mundane of objects, ceramic roof tiles. Scattered across excavations in Jerusalem, archaeologists have unearthed countless fragments of these baked clay tiles, each bearing a stark, impressed stamp, Leg XFR. This simple abbreviation stands for Legio Ex Fretensis, the 10th Legion of the Strait, and these humble artifacts are the enduring fingerprints of the imperial power that sought to erase Jewish Jerusalem from the map. The 10th Legion was not a temporary occupying force, it became a permanent fixture. Following the brutal quashing of the Bar Kokhba revolt 60 years later, the Emperor Hadrian made a calculated decision. To ensure no future rebellions could take root, he systematically dismantled what remained of the Jewish city and rebuilt it as a Roman colony named Aelia Capitolina. This new city was off-limits to Jews, a profound and painful exile from their own spiritual capital, and the engine of this transformation was the 10th Legion. They were not just soldiers, they were the builders, engineers, and craftsmen tasked with constructing this new Roman reality. The Legion maintained its own kilns and pottery workshops, producing everything from bricks and pipes to the very roof tiles that sheltered their barracks, bathhouses, and administrative buildings. Each tile, before being fired, was stamped with the Legion's mark, a practice of military accountability that turned everyday construction materials into powerful statements of ownership and control. Finding these tiles today is like finding scattered pieces of a puzzle that reveal a vast, systematic program of cultural erasure. They have been discovered embedded in the foundations of Roman structures built directly over the ruins of Jewish neighborhoods, and even more poignantly, in the rubble of the Temple Mount itself. It is a chilling thought that the legionaries who destroyed the temple may have used tiles stamped with their own insignia to roof the new pagan temples that Hadrian ordered built on the site. These stamps are more than just manufacturers' logos, they are symbols of a calculated psychological campaign. The Roman Empire was demonstrating that it could not only conquer a people but could also overwrite their history, building its own world directly atop the sacred ashes of the old. The story of the 10th Legion tiles is also a story of unexpected historical irony. While the Romans intended these stamps to signify their eternal dominion, they inadvertently created one of the most reliable dating tools for archaeologists. Because the Legio Ex Fretensis was stationed in Jerusalem for nearly 2 centuries, any layer of excavation containing these stamped tiles can be confidently dated to the period between the 1st and 3rd centuries of the Common Era. This allows archaeologists to create a clear stratigraphic timeline, helping them distinguish between earlier Jewish remains and the later Roman city built above them. In their attempt to stamp their authority on Jerusalem forever, the Romans left behind a perfect chronological marker that now helps scholars meticulously piece together the very history the empire tried to suppress. These baked clay fragments, once symbols of oppression, have been transformed by time into essential keys for unlocking the truth of Jerusalem's layered and resilient past. Descending from the Roman garrison stamped tiles, we venture into a place whose very name evokes a sense of foreboding and sacred tragedy, Akeldama, an Aramaic name meaning field of blood. Located in the Hinnom Valley, this area was traditionally a potter's field, a place for burying strangers and the destitute. According to the New Testament's book of Acts, it was purchased with the 30 pieces of silver returned by a remorseful Judas Iscariot, forever linking the land to betrayal and death. It was here, in rock-cut tombs honeycombing the valley slopes, that archaeologists uncovered a collection of ornately decorated limestone ossuaries, offering a profound and intimate glimpse into the burial customs of 1st century Jerusalem's affluent residents. An ossuary is a small chest typically carved from soft limestone, used in a practice known as secondary burial. In this 2-stage ritual, a body would first be laid out in a niche within a tomb, allowing the flesh to decompose over the course of about a year. Then the family would return to gather the bones and carefully place them into the ossuary, which would be stored alongside the bone boxes of other family members. This practice, which was popular for a brief period from roughly 20 before the Common Era to 70 of the Common Era, was deeply symbolic. It represented a belief in the eventual physical resurrection of the dead, as articulated in the biblical verse from Ezekiel, "I will open your graves and bring you up from them." By collecting the bones, the family was preserving the essential physical identity of the individual, preparing them for the day when they would be reconstituted by God. The use of an ossuary was also a clear marker of social status and wealth, as only those who could afford a family tomb and the skilled labor to carve the ornate box could participate in this tradition. The ossuaries found at Akeldama are particularly remarkable for their artistry and their inscriptions. Many are adorned with intricate carvings, elaborate rosettes, geometric patterns, and architectural motifs like the facade of a tomb or temple. But it is the names scratched or carefully carved into their sides that have sent ripples of excitement through the world of biblical archaeology. Inscriptions like Simon Bar Jonah and Mary Magdalene leap from the pages of the Gospels, inviting us to consider an astonishing possibility. Could these be the bone boxes of the very individuals who walked alongside Jesus of Nazareth? The name Simon Bar Jonah is the full patronymic or father's name of the Apostle Peter. Finding it on an ossuary in 1st century Jerusalem is without question a stunning discovery. Similarly, Mary Magdalene identifies a specific Mary from the fishing village of Magdala on the Sea of Galilee, a woman who the Gospels describe as a devoted follower of Jesus and one of the first witnesses to his resurrection. The immediate temptation is to connect these boxes directly to these foundational figures of Christianity. However, the academic community responds with necessary and sober caution. These were among the most common names in 1st century Judea. Estimates suggest that perhaps a quarter of all women were named Mary, and Simon was also an exceedingly popular name for men. The name Simon Bar Jonah essentially translates to Simon, son of John, a combination that would have been shared by many men. Therefore, while it is statistically possible that one of these ossuaries could belong to the biblical figures, it is impossible to prove definitively without additional, unique identifying information. This does not, however, diminish their immense historical value. These inscribed boxes are not proofs of specific biblical personalities, but they are powerful proof of the world those personalities inhabited. They confirm that individuals with those exact names and from those specific towns lived in Jerusalem during the exact right time period. They provide a tangible, physical connection to the social and religious milieu described in the New Testament. To hold one of these ossuaries is to hold the remains of someone who lived through the same tumultuous events, who may have heard the teachings of the popular rabbis of the day, and who participated in the same burial customs as the earliest members of the Christian movement. They are silent witnesses to a world alive with faith, hope, and the complex tapestry of Jewish life in the decades leading up to the catastrophic Roman destruction. They remind us that the stories of the Bible unfolded in a real place, among real people who grieved for their loved ones, invested in beautifully carved stone boxes to honor them, and placed their hope in the promise of resurrection, their personal faith forever etched in limestone for the ages. Moving from the grand scale of city walls and the personal intimacy of burial boxes, we now turn our attention to an object that bridges the gap between the household and the heavens, offering a rare glimpse into the private spiritual lives of ancient Jerusalem's inhabitants. In the 1980s, archaeologists sifting through layers of an Iron Age Roman tomb building in the city of David made a startling discovery: the fragmented remains of a beautifully decorated hollow ceramic stand, meticulously reassembled to reveal a stunning piece of cultic art. This is not a weapon, a piece of jewelry, or a common pot. This object, known as the Iron Age Roman II cult stand, is a window into a world of domestic devotion that operated in the very shadow of the emerging temple. Crafted from fired clay and standing nearly 2 feet tall, the stand is a masterpiece of Israelite ceramic art and religious symbolism. Its sides are adorned with applied, sculpted figures and intricate motifs that would have been instantly meaningful to its original users. Most striking are the depictions of mythical creatures, often interpreted as cherubim or seraphim, powerful, hybrid guardian beings with wings and animal features that were believed to serve in the divine court of Yahweh. Interwoven with these celestial guardians is another potent symbol, the Tree of Life, a lush, stylized palm tree bursting with dates, representing fertility, divine blessing, and the ongoing cycle of life sustained by a creator God. The existence of such an elaborate object in a domestic setting challenges a simplistic reading of ancient Judahite religion. We often imagine this period, the time of the kings of Judah, as one where worship was already fully centralized at the temple in Jerusalem, as commanded in the book of Deuteronomy. The biblical texts, particularly those written from a later, reformist perspective, rail constantly against the high places and domestic idols, condemning the worship of Yahweh outside of the official, priestly-controlled temple context. This cult stand provides the physical, archaeological evidence for the very practices those texts were trying to suppress. It reveals a religion that was far more diverse and decentralized than the later, streamlined biblical narrative suggests. In the homes of ordinary and likely affluent Jerusalemites, worship was a household affair. This stand would have been used as a small altar or a platform, perhaps to burn incense as an offering to Yahweh, to present small food offerings, or to hold a sacred symbol. The presence of divine guardians and the Tree of Life suggests that people sought protection and prosperity directly from God within their own homes, appealing for His blessing on their family, their harvest, and their future. Dating to the 9th or 8th century before the Common Era, this artifact comes from a pivotal moment in Judah's history. This was the era just before the religious reforms of kings like Hezekiah and Josiah, who, according to the Bible, attempted to demolish all rival altars and centralize all worship exclusively in the Jerusalem temple. The cult stand shows us what was there before those reforms. It represents a vibrant, popular piety that existed alongside the official state religion. For the family that owned it, their relationship with the divine was not something that could only be accessed through a priest in a distant temple on a festival day. It was an intimate, daily interaction within their own four walls. The stand allows us to picture a mother offering incense for the health of her children, a father praying for a successful harvest before the symbol of the Tree of Life, the entire household seeking the protection of the winged guardians depicted on the stand's sides. This is the quiet, personal faith that existed in the home, a faith that official texts often dismissed as superstition or syncretism, but that was, for most people, the real heart of their religious experience. The Iron Age Roman II cult stand is therefore a sacred relic of everyday life, a testament to the deep human need to connect with the divine in the most personal of spaces, long before any king or priest could dictate how that connection should be made. Walking through the modern Jewish quarter, it's almost impossible to envision the utter devastation that met the archaeologists who began digging here after the 1967 war. The area was a landscape of rubble, a casualty of the 1948 conflict. But as they cleared the debris and dug deeper, they unearthed a revelation that spoke not of destruction, but of breathtaking imperial grandeur. They found a wide, colonnaded avenue, its massive stone paving slabs still worn smooth by the footsteps of countless pilgrims, its sidewalks once lined with the shops of eager merchants. This was the Byzantine Cardo Maximus, the monumental main street of 6th century Jerusalem, and its discovery provided a stunningly vivid snapshot of the city's triumphant transformation into the spiritual capital of the Christian world. The Cardo's story begins with the ambitious vision of one of history's most formidable rulers, the Byzantine Emperor Justinian I. In the wake of a series of riots that had damaged parts of the city, Justinian launched an immense building project in the middle of the 6th century, not merely to repair, but to reinvent Jerusalem on a colossal scale. His goal was to create a destination worthy of its status as the center of the Christian universe, a city that would awe every visitor with its imperial might and divine sanction. The new Cardo was the central artery of this grand design. While a Cardo had existed in the Roman and earlier Byzantine city, running north from the Damascus Gate, Justinian's engineers extended it dramatically southward. They carved this new section directly through the ruined remains of the upper city, which had lain in waste since the Roman destruction nearly 500 years earlier, effectively doubling the length of the city's main thoroughfare and integrating the entire urban landscape into a single, magnificent whole. To walk its course today is to understand the sheer power of Byzantine urban planning. The street itself is enormous, over 40 feet wide enough for 2 chariots to pass comfortably. On either side, raised sidewalks sheltered pedestrians from the bustle of carts and animals. Most impressively, the entire avenue was shaded by a continuous colonnade of towering columns, many of which have been re-erected, supporting a covered portico that ran the street's entire length. This covered walkway was a masterpiece of practical design, protecting shoppers and pilgrims from the scorching summer sun and the sudden winter rains, creating a climate-controlled environment for commerce and social life. Beneath the portico, the original shop fronts are still visible, small, vaulted chambers where merchants would have sold everything from fine imported wines and olive oil to votive offerings, pilgrim tokens, and other religious souvenirs. Stepping into one of these shops, you can almost hear the clamor of commerce, the haggling over prices in a dozen different languages, and sense the excitement of travelers who had journeyed from across the known world to walk this sacred path. The Cardo was far more than just a street. It was a carefully stage-managed processional route, a spiritual journey in stone. Its primary function was to channel the endless stream of pilgrims from one holy site to the next. A traveler would have entered the city at the Damascus Gate to the north, joined the flow of the crowds on the Cardo, and been guided southward past the forums and markets. The street would have eventually led them directly to the entrance of the Knee Church, another of Justinian's monumental constructions, and then onward toward the area of the Holy Sepulchre. This wasn't accidental. It was a deliberate architectural strategy to frame the pilgrim experience, to build anticipation, and to visually demonstrate the power of the Christian empire that now safeguarded these holy places. The very stones underfoot were meant to impress upon the visitor that they were walking in a city ordained by God and protected by his emperor in Constantinople. The most captivating evidence of this vibrant past was found etched into the stone pavement itself. Among the worn slabs, archaeologists discovered a series of intricate games scratched into the pavement by bored shopkeepers or waiting children. The most famous is a complex board game known as the 12 Sanctuaries or Holy City game, a kind of spiritual precursor to snakes and ladders. The board's layout depicts a circuit of sacred sites, and players would have moved their pieces along the path, effectively reenacting their pilgrimage in miniature. This simple graffiti is incredibly revealing. It shows that the Cardo was not just a formal processional way, but a living, breathing space where the sacred and the mundane intermingled freely. While pilgrims sought profound spiritual transformation, local children played games about it on the sidewalk, and merchants sold trinkets next to the very columns that symbolized imperial glory. The Byzantine Cardo Maximus stands as a powerful monument to a specific moment in time when Jerusalem, draped in the finery of a Christian Roman Empire, opened its arms to the world, inviting all to walk its magnificent street and witness the faith made manifest in stone and marble. Long before kings and prophets walked these hills, before empires laid siege to its walls, Jerusalem was already a place of immense power and strategic significance, a fact dramatically confirmed by the discovery of its earliest known fortifications. While much attention is given to the city of David and Solomon, our story now plunges even deeper into the past, to the Middle Bronze Age in the 18th century before the Common Era. It was here, around the vital Gihon Spring, that archaeologists uncovered the remains of a monumental defensive system so immense, so sophisticated, that it forces a complete re-evaluation of the city's origins. These weren't just walls, they were a statement carved in stone proclaiming that Jerusalem was a major Canaanite city-state, a force to be reckoned with centuries before it ever became the capital of an Israelite kingdom. The heart of these fortifications and the key to understanding their purpose was always the water. The Gihon Spring is the only permanent water source in the immediate area, making it the literal lifeblood of any settlement. Whoever controlled the spring controlled the city. The Canaanite engineers of the time understood this existential vulnerability perfectly. Their solution was a masterclass in ancient military architecture. They constructed a massive, freestanding tower directly over the spring itself, a fortress within a fortress designed to protect the water supply from attackers at all costs. This tower, built with Cyclopean stones, enormous, roughly shaped boulders that fit together without mortar, was just one part of a much larger system. It was connected to the city's main defenses by a thick, formidable wall that ran up the slope, incorporating the natural bedrock into its structure, creating an impregnable barrier that enveloped the entire water system. The scale of this construction is what truly staggers the imagination. The tower itself is monumental, and the associated wall is nearly 23 feet thick in places, a width that rivals the later, famous broad wall built by King Hezekiah over 1,000 years later. To put this in perspective, these defenses were erected in a period when large-scale stone construction was incredibly rare in the hill country. Building something of this magnitude required a highly organized society, a centralized authority with the ability to command a large labor force and advanced engineering knowledge. It speaks of a wealthy and powerful urban center, one that had accumulated significant resources and had much to protect from rival powers. This was not a sleepy village, this was a formidable Canaanite stronghold. This discovery fundamentally reshapes our understanding of biblical history. For a long time, the prevailing narrative, drawn from the book of Joshua and the accounts of David's conquest, depicted Jerusalem, or Jebus as it was known, as a relatively minor Canaanite town, formidable only because of its natural elevation. The mighty fortifications were often attributed to the later Israelite kings. The Middle Bronze Age walls shatter that assumption. They reveal that the city David eventually captured was already ancient, its defenses already legendary. The biblical description of the Jebusites taunting David, confident behind their stronghold of Zion, takes on a whole new meaning. They weren't boasting about a simple wall. They were secure behind a millennia-old legacy of military engineering that had already withstood the test of time. Dating these structures to the Middle Bronze Age also places Jerusalem squarely within a wider historical context. This was the era of the patriarchs in the biblical tradition, a time of extensive trade networks and shifting alliances between powerful city-states across Canaan. The immense effort invested in these defenses suggests that Jerusalem was an active and important player in these regional politics, likely controlling valuable trade routes through the hill country. Its king would have been a contemporary of other powerful Canaanite rulers, negotiating and warring with city-states like Hebron and Shechem. The walls were therefore more than just physical protection. They were a symbol of status, a declaration of autonomy and strength to any potential enemy or ally. Walking among the foundations of these Cyclopean walls today, one is struck by their raw, enduring power. You can still see the clever way the builders used the natural contours of the bedrock, how they fitted the gigantic stones together to create an unbreachable barrier. It is a humbling experience to stand in the shadow of a tower that was already 1,000 years old when King David's soldiers looked up at it, contemplating how to breach it. These fortifications are the silent, stone testimony to a lost chapter of Jerusalem's story, reminding us that the city's destiny as a coveted, contested, and magnificent prize was set in motion not by kings or prophets, but by the ambitious Canaanite rulers of a forgotten age who first saw the strategic genius of this place and built to last for eternity. Descending from the grand colonnades of the Byzantine Cardo, our journey takes us back another 500 years to a street that witnessed the very zenith and then the absolute nadir of ancient Jewish life in Jerusalem. As we move from the world of Christian emperors to that of Roman clients, we find ourselves standing on the Herodian Street, a 2,000-year-old road that offers one of the most immersive and emotionally charged experiences anywhere in the ancient world. This wasn't just any thoroughfare, this was the final, sacred pathway for millions of Jewish pilgrims, the last steps they would take before ascending into the dazzling courts of Herod's temple. Perfectly preserved beneath the rubble of the Roman destruction, this street runs along the base of the Western Wall. To walk its length today is to tread the same smooth, massive limestone paving stones that were worn down by the sandaled feet of countless worshippers. The scale is magnificent, the street itself over 30 feet wide in places, with towering curbstones and a sophisticated drainage system running down its center to handle both rainwater and the refuse of the bustling crowds. But the true magic of this place lies in the intimate details. Lining the street are the remains of a series of small, vaulted shops, their stone shelves and countertops still intact. This was the ancient equivalent of the temple gift shop district. Here, pilgrims could exchange their foreign currency for the Tyrian shekels, the only coinage accepted for the temple tax, ensuring their offerings were ritually pure. They could purchase sacrificial animals, doves, sheep, or cattle, that had been pre-approved by the priests as unblemished and suitable for offering. The air would have been thick with the sounds of commerce and devotion, a cacophony of bleating animals chanting prayers, and the chatter of people who had traveled from every corner of the Jewish diaspora. The archaeological finds from this street are nothing short of spectacular, providing a breathtakingly vivid snapshot of that final, frenetic day of its use. As excavators carefully sifted through the soil beneath the paving stones, they made an astonishing discovery: a vast, hidden hoard of over 7,000 bronze coins. These weren't lost wallets or dropped change. This was a deliberate deposit, a ritual practice. It was a custom for pilgrims, upon completing their vows or making a sacrifice, to leave a small offering of thanks to God by tossing a coin into the street's foundation before it was repaved. Each coin represents a prayer answered, a vow fulfilled, a moment of profound personal gratitude. Holding one of these coins is to hold a direct connection to an individual's moment of faith from 2 millennia ago. Yet, this vibrant scene of pious commerce was frozen in time with terrifying suddenness. The street and its shops were not slowly abandoned, they were catastrophically buried in a single, violent event. When the Roman legions finally broke through Jerusalem's defenses in the summer of 70 of the Common Era, they targeted the Temple Mount with methodical brutality. After looting the temple itself, the soldiers systematically pried the huge ashlars from the top of the Western Wall and hurled them down onto the street and the buildings below. The excavation reveals this destruction with chilling clarity. The vaulted roofs of the shops are shattered, crushed flat by the immense weight of the stones that were deliberately thrown upon them. Many of these tumbled blocks still lie exactly where they fell, some weighing several tons, their impact having pulverized the very structures that had served the pilgrims. Walking through this space today is a profoundly moving experience. You can stand in the shell of a shop and look up to see the very stones that destroyed it, still lodged in the rubble. You can run your hand over a paving stone and see the scrape marks from cartwheels frozen in time. This street is more than an archaeological site. It is a time capsule of a thriving world that was extinguished in a moment of unimaginable violence. It captures the full spectrum of the human experience in first-century Jerusalem: the fervent faith of the pilgrims, the savvy entrepreneurship of the shopkeepers, the meticulous engineering of Herod's builders, and the ruthless efficiency of the Roman war machine. It is a place where joy and devotion are forever intertwined with the stark reality of destruction, a silent testament to the thousands of lives that were forever changed on its stones. Rising from the bedrock just south of the Temple Mount, a stone's throw from the sacred precincts revered by Jews and Christians, lies a sprawling complex that seems to whisper of a forgotten caliphate. This is the Umayyad Palace, a magnificent administrative center built in the early 8th century by the Umayyad dynasty, the first great Islamic empire to rule over Jerusalem. Discovered in the 1960s during extensive excavations, the palace complex is a breathtaking paradox, a monument to immense power and luxury that was used for less than a single human lifetime before being mysteriously abandoned, its opulent halls left to be slowly buried by time. The scale and ambition of the construction are immediately staggering. This was not a single building but an entire citadel of power, a self-contained district covering nearly 5 acres. It was built with the characteristic precision of Umayyad engineering, using massive, finely dressed stones, many of them repurposed from earlier Roman and Byzantine structures, a common practice that symbolized both pragmatism and the new order literally building upon the old. The complex was centered around a series of grand, multi-story residential palaces, complete with elegant columned courtyards that provided light and air to the private chambers. These were not sparse, utilitarian offices. They were designed for comfort and to impress. The floors were adorned with sophisticated geometric mosaics, and the walls were once covered in vibrant frescoes and intricate stucco carvings, fragments of which have survived, hinting at a world of refined aesthetic taste. Perhaps most telling of the luxurious lifestyle within these walls are the remains of a sophisticated bathhouse or hammam. This was no simple bathing facility. It was a classic Roman-style bath complex, complete with a cold room, a warm room, and a hot room, all heated by a hypocaust system where hot air from a furnace was channeled beneath the floors and through clay pipes in the walls. The presence of such a complex reveals a great deal about the Umayyad rulers. They had not only adopted the architectural comforts of the conquered Greco-Roman world, but had fully embraced them, seeing no contradiction between their Islamic faith and the enjoyment of this quintessentially Roman leisure activity. The bathhouse was a place for both physical purification and social interaction, a space where deals were struck and alliances forged away from the public eye. But the true heart of the complex was its grand reception hall. This was the throne room, the place where the local governor or a visiting caliph would have held court, received dignitaries, and projected the authority of the Damascus-based caliphate. Its design was deliberately awe-inspiring, meant to overwhelm visitors with a display of imperial power and cultural sophistication. The function of this entire complex is key to understanding early Muslim rule in Jerusalem. For the Umayyads, Jerusalem, which they called Beit al-Maqdis, the Holy House, was a city of profound religious significance, but it was not yet the primary political capital. Their administrative center was in Damascus. This Jerusalem complex served as a regional capital, a luxurious base for the governor and his bureaucracy, overseeing the province and, crucially, managing the burgeoning pilgrimage traffic to the nearby Temple Mount, which the Umayyads were simultaneously transforming with their magnificent constructions, the Dome of the Rock and the Al-Aqsa Mosque. This brings us to the central mystery of the Umayyad Palace. Why was such a monumental and expensive undertaking abandoned after only a few decades of use? The answer lies in a dramatic political earthquake that shook the entire Islamic world. In the year 750, the Umayyad dynasty was overthrown in a violent revolution by the Abbasids, who moved the capital of the Islamic Empire from Damascus to the newly founded city of Baghdad. Almost overnight, Jerusalem was transformed from an important provincial center near the heart of power to a remote backwater on the periphery of a new empire. The elaborate palace complex, a symbol of the hated old regime, lost its purpose. The Abbasids had no interest in maintaining a lavish Umayyad monument. They shifted the administrative center of Jerusalem north to the area around the Damascus Gate, and the magnificent palaces were simply left to decay. The abandonment was so swift that archaeologists have found evidence of ongoing construction projects that were simply halted in place, tools downed never to be picked up again. This sudden departure frozen in time provides an incredibly clear snapshot of Umayyad life. It preserved the complex not through later renovations and rebuilds, but in a state of suspended animation, allowing us to see the ambitious vision of the first Muslim rulers of Jerusalem in its pure, unfinished form. The Umayyad palace complex therefore stands as a powerful testament to the fleeting nature of political power. It represents a moment when one of the world's great empires sought to put its permanent stamp on the holy city, building in stone what they believed would be an eternal administration. Yet history had other plans, and their grand vision was left incomplete, a majestic ruin that speaks volumes about ambition, faith, and the unpredictable tides of history that wash over even the strongest of foundations. Tucked away from the grand processional streets and the sacred sites, the story of Byzantine Jerusalem is also written in the quiet panic of its residents, a narrative dramatically underscored by the discovery of a fortune hidden in haste. During excavations near the Temple Mount, archaeologists uncovered a small, everyday clay jug that contained anything but everyday contents, a hoard of 264 gold coins, each one a gleaming solidus minted during the reign of Emperor Heraclius. This was not a formal treasury deposit or a ritual offering. This was a family's entire liquid wealth, their life savings, stuffed into a jar and concealed as their world collapsed around them. The coins, found amidst the burnt debris of a collapsed building, form a chillingly precise time capsule from one of the most catastrophic years in the city's long history, 614 of the Common Era. To understand the profound significance of this hidden treasure, we must step back into the terrifying context of that period. For nearly 300 years, Jerusalem had been a jewel of the Eastern Roman, or Byzantine, Empire, a predominantly Christian city adorned with magnificent churches and a steady flow of pilgrims. However, the early 7th century was a time of unprecedented upheaval. The Byzantine Empire was locked in a brutal, decades-long war of survival against its arch-rival, the Sasanian Persian Empire. In 614, the Persian armies, having already swept through the eastern provinces, reached the walls of Jerusalem. The ensuing siege was short, vicious, and utterly devastating. Contemporary accounts describe the walls being breached, widespread slaughter, the systematic burning of churches, and the capture of tens of thousands of citizens, including the patriarch of the city. In a final, symbolic humiliation, the Persians seized the most sacred relic in Christendom, the true cross upon which Jesus was believed to have been crucified, and carried it off as a trophy to their capital. The owner of this gold hoard was almost certainly a wealthy, high-status citizen, likely a merchant, a landowner, or a mid-level official in the Byzantine administration. The solidus was the dollar of the ancient world, a stable, high-value currency trusted across the Mediterranean. 264 of them represented an enormous sum, enough to purchase a very large estate or live in luxury for years. The fact that this person chose to hide their wealth rather than flee with it speaks volumes about the sudden and terrifying nature of the Persian assault. They likely believed the city's formidable walls would hold, or that the crisis would pass, and they could return to retrieve their fortune once order was restored. It was a calculated gamble born of desperation, a hope for a future that for them never arrived. The building they hid it in was likely their own home or a place they trusted implicitly, and its collapse and burning suggest it was directly in the path of the destruction. The coins themselves are more than just bullion. They are tiny pieces of political propaganda that tell their own story. Emperor Heraclius, whose stern, bearded profile is stamped on each coin, had come to the throne in 610 amidst this existential crisis with the Persians. His early reign was marked by a series of disastrous military defeats, and the loss of Jerusalem was one of the lowest points. Interestingly, the dates on the coins are crucial. They were all minted between 610 and 613, meaning the hoard was buried almost immediately after the newest coin entered circulation. There are no coins from 614. This numismatic detail provides a remarkably precise timestamp for the hoard's deposition. It was hidden during or immediately after the Persian sack of 614, before any new currency from Heraclius's reconstituted mints could possibly have reached the city. This treasure, therefore, is a silent witness to a pivotal moment of transfer. It represents the end of one era and the violent, chaotic beginning of another. The Byzantine economic system, with its standardized currency and imperial administration, was literally being buried by its own citizens as an alien power took control. The hoard's non-recovery is perhaps its most poignant feature. The owner was likely killed during the sack or taken captive into exile in Persia, joining the thousands of Jerusalem's inhabitants who suffered that fate. Their secret died with them, and their gold remained in its hiding place for over 13 centuries, a forgotten monument to a single individual's devastating loss. It reminds us that history's grand narratives of empires clashing are, at their core, composed of countless personal tragedies of families broken, homes destroyed, and futures obliterated in an instant. This collection of gold coins is far more than currency. It is crystallized fear, a final, futile act of hope against the overwhelming tide of history, waiting silently in the dark to tell its story. While the grand palaces and fortifications speak of kings and empires, sometimes the most telling discoveries are those that illuminate the intimate, everyday realities of life in the ancient world. Our next artifact does just that, offering a surprisingly personal glimpse into the domestic sphere of Jerusalem's elite, a finely carved limestone toilet seat. Discovered in the Arman Hanatziv neighborhood south of the Old City, this object was found within the remains of a sprawling, luxurious royal estate dating to the late 7th century before the Common Era, the final decades of the Kingdom of Judah. The sheer opulence of the residence, with its elegant architecture and panoramic views of the Temple Mount and the City of David, immediately marked it as the home of a figure of immense wealth and power, likely a high-ranking noble or even a member of the royal family itself. In the modern world, we rarely consider the humble toilet a status symbol, but in the context of the ancient Near East, this simple object was a powerful declaration of sophistication and extreme wealth. The vast majority of the population in Iron Age Jerusalem would have relied on simple pottery chamber pots, which were emptied into the streets or fields or used public latrines. A private, indoor toilet was an extraordinary luxury. This particular seat was not merely functional, it was a piece of crafted stone furniture. Carved from a single block of limestone, it was designed to fit over a deep, septic pit dug into the floor of a small, private room within the house. The presence of this facility, tucked away inside a living space, indicates a revolutionary concern for personal privacy, hygiene, and comfort that was light years ahead of its time. This remarkable find provides a fascinating window into ancient sanitation practices and urban living. The deep pit beneath the seat would have been designed to contain waste, limiting odor and the spread of disease, a significant advancement in public health for a crowded city. The careful construction of this system demonstrates a sophisticated understanding of practical engineering, even in the most private aspects of daily life. For the wealthy individual or family who lived here, this was more than just convenience, it was a statement. It set them apart from the common populace, reinforcing their elevated social status through a level of domestic comfort that was almost unimaginable to most. Yet, this object's significance extends far beyond ancient interior design. Its historical context places it squarely in the middle of one of the most intense religious and political reform movements in biblical history, the reign of King Josiah. According to the books of 2 Kings and 2 Chronicles, Josiah embarked on a radical campaign to centralize all worship in the Jerusalem temple and eradicate all rival sites of worship known as high places or bamat. These were often local altars or shrines where people, including previous kings, had worshipped Yahweh outside of the official priestly control of the temple. The biblical text describes Josiah's agents going throughout the land, tearing down these altars and desecrating them to ensure they could never be used again. And one of the specific methods described for this desecration is strikingly direct. Moreover, Josiah removed the high places that were in Jerusalem, and he defiled them by burning human bones on them. The text goes even further, stating that he destroyed a particular altar at Bethel by pulling it down, and then, as a final act of contempt, he burned the high place and crushed it to powder and burned the Asherah pole. Then Josiah looked around, and when he saw the tombs that were there on the hillside, he had the bones removed from them and burned on the altar to defile it. This is where the toilet seat from Amen-Hanatziv becomes a potential archaeological witness to this very practice. The house where it was found was not just any wealthy home. It was destroyed in the same wave of devastation that marked the Babylonian conquest of Jerusalem in 586 before the Common Era. But significantly, the toilet seat was found not in its pit, but carefully placed and sealed within a foundation deposit beneath the floor, a practice often associated with ritual. Some archaeologists have proposed a provocative theory that this specific toilet seat may have been used not for its intended sanitary purpose, but as a tool of religious desecration. If a pagan altar or a forbidden bama was discovered on this estate by King Josiah's reformers, they might have been ordered to dismantle it. In accordance with the biblical text, one of the most definitive ways to render an altar permanently unclean and unfit for any future worship would be to bring it into contact with human waste. The deliberate, ritual placement of a toilet seat upon the defiled altar would have been the ultimate act of religious insult, transforming a sacred space into something profane. Whether this particular artifact was used in such a dramatic fashion may never be proven conclusively, yet its very existence in such a context is profoundly revealing. It serves as a tangible, almost unsettling link to the social world described in the Bible. It confirms the vast gap between the luxurious lives of the elite and the common people, and it provides a physical, archaeological anchor for the kind of radical religious reforms carried out by Josiah. This limestone seat is far more than a curiosity. It is a silent testament to the deeply personal ways in which the great political and religious currents of the day, the struggle between centralized power and local practice, the definition of sacred and profane, rippled through the very homes of Jerusalem's most powerful citizens, even reaching into the most private room of the house. Beneath the worn paving stones of the Herodian Street, in the dark, damp silence of a 2,000-year-old drainage channel, time stood still for one Roman soldier. It was here, during excavations, that archaeologists made a find that sent a jolt of electricity through the entire team: a Roman gladius, a soldier's short sword, resting in the muck as if it had been placed there just moments before. This was no rusted, skeletal fragment of a blade. It was found perfectly preserved, its iron core still sheathed in its elegant wooden scabbard, the leather and wood miraculously saved from decay by the unique, oxygen-poor environment of the sewer. The weapon was complete, from its sharp, lethal point to the rounded guard designed to protect the soldier's hand. It was a silent, stunning relic of individual panic, dropped or discarded in the heat of the most ferocious urban combat ancient Jerusalem had ever witnessed. To understand how this sword came to be abandoned in a drain, we must reconstruct the horrific final days of the Jewish revolt in the year 70 of the Common Era. After a long and brutal siege, the Roman legions under the future Emperor Titus had finally breached Jerusalem's outer walls, but the hardest fighting was yet to come. Jewish zealot fighters, though starving and outnumbered, refused to surrender. They turned the city's narrow streets and sturdy homes into a deadly maze of ambushes and strongpoints, forcing the Romans to fight for every inch of ground. The Herodian Street, which just weeks before had been a bustling pilgrim thoroughfare, became a nightmarish killing zone. Roman soldiers, clad in heavy armor and moving in tight formations, would have advanced down this very street, shields locked, while arrows, stones, and boiling oil rained down upon them from the rooftops and from the Temple Mount above. In this chaos of close-quarters combat, a soldier's gladius was his most vital tool. Unlike the long, slashing swords of later eras, the gladius was designed for brutal, efficient stabbing. A soldier would use his large shield to batter an opponent off balance, then thrust the short, incredibly sharp blade into exposed flesh with devastating effect. The loss of such a weapon in the midst of a fight would have been a catastrophic event for the legionary, potentially a death sentence. So how did it end up in the drain? We can imagine several plausible, heart-pounding scenarios. Perhaps the soldier was wounded, stumbling and dropping his sword into the sewer grate as he fell. Perhaps he was engaged in a desperate struggle atop the grate itself, and the weapon was knocked from his grasp, clattering down into the darkness below. Or perhaps in a moment of rare and frantic respite, he intentionally hid it there, hoping to retrieve it later, a plan that, like so many others in those final days, was forever thwarted. The sword is more than a weapon, it is a direct link to the man who carried it. He was a soldier of the Legio Ex Fretensis, the 10th Legion of the Strait, the primary force tasked with crushing the rebellion. He was a professional, a cog in the most efficient military machine the world had ever known. But he was also an individual far from home, fighting in the terrifying, confined spaces of a foreign city. The discovery of his sword in the drain personalizes the anonymous violence of history. We are no longer just reading about the Roman army. We are holding the very instrument one man used to survive and perhaps to kill. It forces us to consider the human experience on both sides of the conflict, the fear and discipline of the Roman legionary, and the desperate, fanatical courage of the Jewish defender he was fighting. This single artifact, lying undiscovered for millennia, completes the story told by the massive tumbled stones and crushed shops of the Herodian Street. The huge blocks show us the impersonal, engineering-scale destruction wrought by the Romans. The hidden coins speak of the pilgrims' piety and the residents' terror. But the gladius tells a story of intimate, personal violence. It is a frozen moment of metallic panic, a ghostly echo of clashing steel and shouted orders that has waited 2,000 years to be heard. It reminds us that history's grandest tragedies are always, in the end, composed of countless individual acts of courage, fear, and loss, each one leaving a mark, sometimes as small as a sword in a drain waiting for us to find. Moving from the grim relics of warfare and the private luxuries of the elite, our journey now turns to an object that represents hope, faith, and the deeply human desire to carry a piece of the sacred back into the mundane world. Imagine a traveler weary from a long and dangerous journey finally reaching their destination, the holy city of Jerusalem. They have come to walk in the footsteps of their Savior, to pray at the sites of his passion and resurrection, and to seek a tangible connection to the divine. Before returning home, they would acquire a small, inexpensive souvenir, a clay flask known as an ampulla. These unassuming vessels, often no larger than a chicken's egg, are among the most intimate and revealing artifacts from Byzantine Jerusalem, offering a window into the world of ancient pilgrimage. Crafted from terracotta and sealed with a small stopper, an ampulla was designed for one specific purpose: to carry a liquid sanctified by contact with a holy place. The most prized contents were oil from the lamps that burned constantly at sacred shrines, or water from a site associated with a miracle. The faithful believed this liquid, now infused with the sanctity of its source, carried healing and protective properties. They would use it to anoint themselves or their loved ones, to bless their homes, or to bring comfort in times of illness or danger. The ampulla itself was often decorated with simple but powerful symbols stamped into the clay before it was fired. Common motifs included the crucifixion, the resurrection, or a depiction of the saint venerated at the particular shrine where it was purchased. One of the most frequent designs features a stylized representation of the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, allowing the pilgrim to carry an image of the sacred architecture home with them as well. The sheer number of these ampullae found across Europe, North Africa, and the Middle East is a testament to the colossal scale of the pilgrimage industry in Byzantine Jerusalem. Following the Emperor Constantine's legalization of Christianity and his mother Helena's subsequent journey to the Holy Land in the 4th century, the city was systematically transformed into a physical map of Christian salvation. Grand basilicas were built over the sites of the crucifixion and the nativity, creating a network of powerful destinations for the faithful. Pilgrimage became a central pillar of Christian life, a journey that could cleanse sin, fulfill a vow, or simply bring the believer closer to God. This was not a journey for the faint of heart. Travelers faced months of difficult overland travel or a treacherous sea voyage, threats from bandits, and the challenges of unfamiliar languages and customs. That so many undertook this voyage speaks to the immense power these holy sites held in the Christian imagination. The routes these pilgrims took were well established, and their experiences within the city were often carefully choreographed. Many would have arrived from the port of Jaffa, joining the stream of travelers on the roads leading to Jerusalem. Upon entering the city, they would have found a bustling industry ready to serve them. Guides who could navigate the holy sites, inns and hostels for lodging, and countless vendors selling souvenirs and votive offerings. The pilgrim would then follow a set route or sacred topography, moving from one holy site to the next in a spiritual progression that retold the story of Christ's life, death, and resurrection. The climax of this journey was undoubtedly the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, a sprawling complex encompassing both Golgotha, the site of the crucifixion, and the tomb of Christ. Here, pilgrims would light a candle or purchase oil from the lamps burning at the edicule, the small structure housing the tomb itself, carefully filling their ampulla with this most precious liquid. The impact of these small flasks extended far beyond the city walls, effectively making every home they entered a minor satellite of Jerusalem's sanctity. When a pilgrim returned to their village in Gaul or Egypt or Syria, they brought with them not just a story, but a physical substance blessed at the center of the Christian world. The ampulla became a focal point for community veneration. Its oil might be used to anoint a sick child, to bless the foundation of a new local church, or to mark a Christian's forehead during prayer. In this way, the spiritual power of Jerusalem was disseminated person by person, town by town, across the entire known world. The ampulla democratized access to holiness. You did not need to be wealthy or powerful to own a drop of oil from the Holy Sepulchre. This practice created an invisible network of faith, connecting the daily lives of ordinary Christians in distant lands directly to the sacred geography of Jerusalem. These humble clay flasks, often found broken and discarded in ancient rubbish heaps, were therefore not merely souvenirs. They were portable sanctity, vessels of hope that transformed the global reach of Byzantine Christianity from an abstract idea into a tangible, liquid reality. Perched dramatically on the highest point of the eastern ridge, overlooking the deep ravine of the Kidron Valley and the ancient city of David below, stands a silent sentinel from a forgotten war. This is the Hellenistic Tower, a colossal structure of roughly hewn limestone blocks that has weathered over 2,000 years of Jerusalem's tumultuous history. Its sheer scale is immediately overwhelming. Sections of the wall still rise over 20 feet high, and the base is a staggering 14 feet thick, built with a characteristic offset inset design that made such fortifications incredibly resilient against battering rams and siege engines. This tower was not built for show. It was a statement of raw military power, erected during a period of immense turmoil. the often overlooked centuries between the Old and New Testaments when the Jewish people fought their first great war for independence. The story of this tower begins in the wake of Alexander the Great's empire, as his successors, the Seleucid dynasty based in Syria, sought to impose their Hellenistic culture and pagan beliefs on the Jewish population of Judea. Their efforts culminated in the infamous desecration of the Second Temple by Antiochus IV Epiphanes, an act of sacrilege that sparked the Maccabean revolt. It was during this explosive period, likely in the early 2nd century before the Common Era, that the Seleucid occupiers constructed this formidable fortress. Its purpose was starkly pragmatic: to dominate the city of David and the vital approach to the Temple Mount from the south and east. From its commanding position, garrisoned soldiers could monitor all movement in the valley and the lower city, effectively controlling the primary water source, the Gihon Spring, and suppressing any potential uprising from the Jewish inhabitants clustered below. The tower was a fist of stone, clenched to keep a rebellious people in check. Yet, in a beautiful twist of historical irony, this symbol of oppression was later transformed into a bastion of Jewish defiance. The Maccabean revolt was successful beyond anyone's wildest dreams. Against all odds, the Jewish rebels, led by Judah Maccabee and his brothers, eventually expelled the Seleucid forces, rededicated the temple, an event commemorated by the holiday of Hanukkah, and established the independent Hasmonean kingdom. The new Jewish rulers were pragmatic leaders. They looked at the powerful Hellenistic tower and saw not a monument to their former oppressors, but a superb piece of military real estate. Rather than dismantling it, they seized it, modified it, and made it their own. Archaeological evidence clearly shows a second phase of construction, where the Hasmoneans thickened the walls even further and added their own distinctive touch, a layer of smooth, plastered facing on the interior walls. This was more than a mere aesthetic choice. It prevented attackers from finding any handholds should they breach the outer defenses, and made the rooms easier to clean and maintain for a permanent garrison. This adaptive reuse tells us something profound about the Hasmoneans. They were savvy strategists who understood that to maintain their hard-won independence, they needed to adopt the military technology of their enemies. The tower became a key component of Jerusalem's defensive system, protecting the vulnerable southeastern approach to the city and the temple. Its history reflects the turbulent journey of the Jewish people from subjugated subjects to sovereign rulers. But the tower's strategic life was not over. When King Herod the Great came to power decades later, he embarked on the most ambitious building project in Jerusalem's history, expanding the Temple Mount and surrounding the city with mighty walls and lavish palaces. Herod's engineers looked at the existing landscape with a calculating eye. The Hellenistic tower, already a century old, was still perfectly positioned and fantastically well built. Instead of demolishing it, Herod's builders simply integrated it into the foundation of their new, sprawling palace complex that stretched along the western crest of the ridge. The old tower became an unshakable foundation for Herod's new opulence, its robust structure supporting the weight of a new era. Standing beside the massive stones of the Hellenistic tower today, you are touching three distinct layers of history in a single place. You can feel the rough, oppressive weight of the Seleucid construction, see the practical modifications of the Hasmonean defenders, and understand how it all served as the bedrock for Herod's visionary ambition. This tower is a powerful reminder that Jerusalem's history is not a series of clean breaks, but a continuous palimpsest where each conqueror and liberator built upon the physical and cultural foundations of those who came before. It symbolizes a pivotal moment of transition when the Jewish people emerged from the shadow of foreign empires to carve out their own destiny, and in doing so, they took the very tools of their oppression and forged them into instruments of their protection. While grand towers and hidden treasures capture the imagination, some of the most compelling evidence for Jerusalem's ancient past comes from objects so small they can be lost in a handful of soil. In the city of David, archaeologists sifting through the debris of a monumental public building destroyed by the Babylonians in 586 before the Common Era made a discovery that would send ripples through the world of biblical studies. They uncovered an administrative archive, but this was no library of papyrus scrolls which would have perished in the fires that consumed the city. Instead, they found hundreds of tiny, fired clay lumps, many no larger than a fingernail. These were bulla, the discarded seal impressions used to authenticate documents in the ancient world. In a society where literacy was limited to a scribble elite, official correspondence and legal contracts were written on papyrus scrolls, tied with a string, and then sealed with a dollop of wet clay. The sender would press their unique signet ring into the clay, leaving an impression that served as both a signature and a tamper-proof guarantee. Once the scroll was opened, the brittle clay seal was broken and discarded. The building in which these bulla were found, now known as the Bulla House, was likely the office of a royal minister or a major government scribe. When the Babylonians set the structure ablaze, the intense heat accidentally fired and preserved these fragile clay impressions, baking them as hard as pottery and saving them for discovery 2,500 years later. The true revolution of this collection lies not in its existence, but in the names meticulously inscribed on them, scratched in the elegant Paleo-Hebrew script of the late First Temple period. These seals bear the names of real individuals who walked the streets of Jerusalem and served in the court of its kings. Two bulla in particular caused a sensation. One reads, belonging to Gemariahu, son of Shaphan. This name leaps directly from the pages of the book of Jeremiah. In chapter 36, the prophet Jeremiah has his scribe, Baruch, write down all his prophecies of doom on a scroll. Baruch then reads the scroll in the temple, and it causes such a stir that the officials decide the king must hear it. The biblical text tells us, then the officials went to the king in the court. And they reported all the words to the king. So the king sent Jehudi to get the scroll, and Jehudi read it to the king. Now the king was sitting in the winter house, and there was a fire burning in the brazier before him. And when Jehudi had read 3 or 4 columns, the king would cut them off with a scribe's knife and throw them into the fire in the brazier until the entire scroll was consumed. And who were these officials who brought the scroll to the king? The verse names them, Elathan the son of Achbor and Gemariah the son of Shaphan. Here, in a layer of ash dating to the Babylonian destruction, we have the actual seal impression of one of the very officials present at that dramatic scene, a man who handled the scroll of the prophet Jeremiah. A second bulla from the same collection is equally stunning. It reads, belonging to Azariahu, son of Hilkiah. This name holds profound significance because it parallels the name of the high priest who served in the temple during the reign of King Josiah, as recounted in the second book of Kings. Hilkiah was the priest who famously discovered the book of the law in the temple, a discovery that triggered Josiah's sweeping religious reforms. While this bulla likely belongs to a different Azariahu, perhaps a son or relative of that high priest, it powerfully confirms that the name and the priestly lineage were prominent in Jerusalem at exactly the right time. These are not common names plucked from a census. They are the specific names of high-ranking courtiers and priests, individuals who moved in the most powerful circles of the kingdom. Beyond these famous examples, the entire collection of several hundred bulla forms a priceless social and administrative database. The names include not only government officials but also their fathers, providing a glimpse into family dynasties that held power. The titles on some seals, such as Son of the King, likely referring to a royal prince rather than the monarch himself, or Servant of the King, a title for a high-ranking minister, help us reconstruct the complex bureaucracy of the late Judahite kingdom. The very fact that so many bulla were found in one place suggests a centralized archive where documents were received, opened, and filed. Each tiny piece of clay is a frozen moment of administrative activity, a letter received from a provincial governor, a tax record, a legal decree, or a royal edict. The Iron Age Roman II bulla collection does something that few other discoveries can. It puts flesh and blood on the biblical narrative. The figures in the books of Kings and Jeremiah can sometimes feel like literary characters. These bullae transform them into historical actors. We can picture Gemariahu, son of Shaphan, his signet ring on his finger, pressing it into the clay to seal a document, perhaps even the very report to the king about Jeremiah's scroll. We can see the hands of the scribes in the bullae house breaking the seals, unrolling the papyrus, and then sweeping the broken clay fragments into a corner, never imagining that their discarded trash would become one of the most powerful testimonies to their world's reality. These minuscule artifacts are a potent rebuttal to centuries of scholarly skepticism, offering breathtaking, tangible proof that the history recorded in the Bible was written by people who knew the names, the titles, and the very administrative machinery of the Kingdom of Judah. Nestled within the ancient walls of the Christian quarter, far from the grand tales of knights and conquests, lies a discovery that speaks to a more visceral and intimate reality of the Crusader presence in Jerusalem, a surgeon's kit. This collection of bronze instruments, carefully packed and then lost to time, includes scalpels of various sizes, finely crafted forceps, a mortar for grinding medicines, and other specialized tools. This is not a hoard of treasure in the traditional sense, but a cache of professional equipment that offers a stunningly clear window into the brutal and surprisingly sophisticated world of medieval medicine practiced in the shadow of holy war. To understand the significance of these instruments, we must step into the horrifying context of siege warfare in the 12th century. When Crusader armies laid siege to a city like Jerusalem, or when they themselves were besieged, the battlefield was not an open field but a chaotic hellscape of stone, fire, and flying projectiles. The injuries were ghastly: compound fractures from stones hurled by catapults, deep puncture wounds from arrows and crossbow bolts, terrible lacerations from sword and axe blows, and devastating burns from Greek fire or boiling oil poured from the walls. The surgeon's primary role was not to cure disease but to save lives through immediate, drastic intervention. Amputation was a common and horrifyingly necessary procedure to prevent gangrene from setting in after a limb was crushed or severely wounded. The scalpels in this kit would have been used to cut through flesh, the forceps to probe for and extract arrowheads or bone fragments, and the saws to remove shattered limbs with a speed that seems barbaric to us but was the only chance for survival. Yet this kit reveals a story far more complex than one of mere butchery. The very presence of a mortar and pestle hints at the other half of a Crusader surgeon's practice, the preparation of salves, poultices, and medicines. This is where the historical narrative becomes fascinatingly intertwined. The Crusaders, often depicted as brutish invaders from a backward Europe, arrived in a Levant that was a beacon of advanced medical knowledge. Arab and Persian physicians, building upon the works of the ancient Greeks like Galen and adding centuries of their own research, were world leaders in medicine. They had developed sophisticated herbal remedies, understood the importance of cleanliness long before it was standard in Europe, and wrote extensive medical texts. The Crusader states, once established, became a remarkable melting pot of knowledge. It is highly likely that the owner of this surgery kit, perhaps a literate surgeon attached to a military order like the Knights Hospitaller, would have had access to this blended wisdom. He might have carried with him the standard European medical manuals, but in the markets and apothecaries of Jerusalem, he would have acquired local herbs, learned new techniques from Arab doctors, or even had medical texts translated. The mortar in his kit might have been used to grind not just European herbs, but also imported spices and compounds whose medicinal properties were known to Middle Eastern physicians. This represents a quiet, practical cultural exchange happening amidst the relentless religious conflict, a shared desire to alleviate suffering that, at times, transcended the deep divisions of the era. The design of the instruments themselves tells a story of functionality and portability. This was the kit of a traveling military surgeon, a man who needed to be ready to set up a field station anywhere, in a tent outside a besieged castle, in the courtyard of a captured fortress, or within the cramped confines of the Christian quarter itself. Each tool had to be durable, effective, and essential. The bronze construction, while susceptible to corrosion, was easier to cast and repair than iron in the field. Finding such a complete set together is incredibly rare. Often, tools were lost, broken, or scattered. That this collection was found as a group suggests it was stored in a leather roll or a wooden box, perhaps hastily abandoned during a sudden attack or lost in a fire, only to be preserved for centuries in the Jerusalem soil. This assembly of bronze tools is therefore a powerful dual symbol. On one hand, it is a stark reminder of the unimaginable pain and brutality of holy war, of the crude and desperate measures taken to save lives in an age before anesthesia or germ theory. We can almost hear the screams that would have accompanied the use of these very instruments. On the other hand, it is a testament to human ingenuity and the unexpected transmission of knowledge across cultures. It speaks of a skilled professional plying his trade in the most difficult circumstances, potentially drawing on the best medical practices of both East and West. This surgeon's kit doesn't tell the story of the kings and popes who planned the Crusades. It tells the story of the man who had to deal with their consequences, one terrible wound at a time, using the limited but vital tools he carried with him into the heart of a fractured Jerusalem. Hidden within the thick stone of a centuries-old house near the Damascus Gate, tucked away from the eyes of the world, a bundle of papers waited silently. They were not official decrees from a sultan, nor religious edicts from an imam. They were something far more rare and intimate, a collection of love letters from the Ottoman period, penned in the elegant, flowing script of 18th century Arabic. In a city where archaeology so often reveals the grand narratives of conquest and faith, this discovery was different. It whispered. It spoke of stolen glances, of heartache, of the private yearnings of ordinary people whose lives played out in the shadow of Jerusalem's immortal walls. The letters themselves are masterpieces of informal art. The Arabic script, so often seen in formal religious or legal documents, is here employed for the most personal of communications. The ink flows across the paper with a graceful urgency, the curves and dots of the letters seeming to capture the very emotion of the writer. The language is poetic, rich with metaphor and expressions of deep affection that feel both timeless and deeply rooted in the cultural moment of their creation. Terms of endearment, vows of unwavering devotion, and poignant descriptions of loneliness during separation fill the pages. They reveal a sophisticated emotional world, one where expressing love was not just a private act but a literary one, a skill valued and cultivated. These were not hastily scrawled notes. They were composed with care, each word chosen to convey the depth of a feeling that the writer hoped would bridge the physical distance between them and their beloved. But who were these people? The letters offer tantalizing clues without always giving full names, protecting the privacy of the lovers even as they declared their feelings. From the context, we can piece together fragments of their lives. One set of correspondence appears to be between a merchant who frequently traveled for work, perhaps along the trade routes that converged at the Damascus Gate, and his wife, who remained in their Jerusalem home managing the household and caring for their children. Her letters express a steadfast love intertwined with the practical anxieties of daily life, concerns about money, the health of family members, and the challenges of navigating local gossip in a tightly knit community. His replies are filled with longing for home, descriptions of the strange cities he visits, and assurances of his safe return. In another letter, a young man pleads with the family of his beloved, arguing for her hand in marriage against their objections. His words a mixture of respect for tradition and a fierce, modern-sounding insistence on following his heart. The location of their discovery, hidden within the fabric of a house wall, adds another layer of poignant mystery. Why were they concealed? Perhaps they were tucked away for safekeeping, a personal treasure too precious to risk losing. Maybe they were hidden from the prying eyes of a strict family or a disapproving society where romantic love was not always the primary consideration in marriage. Or perhaps in the end they were simply forgotten, placed in a small crevice for temporary storage, and then sealed behind plaster during a renovation, left to become a secret for another era to uncover. Their hiding place speaks to the vulnerability of these emotions, to the fact that even the most powerful human feelings often had to exist in the private shadows of a very public city. This discovery does something that grand monuments and ancient weapons never can. It utterly humanizes Jerusalem's past. For a moment, the booming cannons of empires fall silent. The theological debates of clerics and scholars fade into the background. We are left with the essential, universal heartbeat of human experience. The person who wrote these letters was not an Ottoman official or a religious scholar. They were someone who missed their partner, who worried about their family, who felt the exhilarating rush of new love and the aching pain of separation. They navigated a world of social expectations, economic pressures, and family duties, all while carrying the private, burning intensity of their affections. These fragile papers are a powerful reminder that while Jerusalem is a city of global significance, it has always been, first and foremost, a home. It is a place where people fell in love, raised families, whispered secrets, and dreamed their private dreams. The ink on these pages, once fresh with the emotion of the moment, now serves as a permanent testament to that simple, profound truth, connecting us across the centuries not through power or faith, but through the timeless, unbreakable language of the heart. Of all the treasures ever plundered from Jerusalem, none hold a more potent or enduring mystique than the sacred vessels looted from the Second Temple by the Roman legions in the year 70. The destruction was not merely an act of conquest, it was a calculated desecration, and the systematic removal of the temple's most holy objects was its ultimate symbol. The spoils were a central feature of the triumphal procession through the streets of Rome, vividly depicted for eternity on the Arch of Titus. There, carved in marble, Roman soldiers carry the spoils of their victory, the massive golden seven-branched menorah, the silver trumpets, and perhaps the table of showbread. These were not just golden artifacts, they were the very heart of Jewish worship, the instruments through which the divine presence was believed to connect with the people. Their capture represented the death of a nation, and their disappearance into the mists of history has spawned an enigma that has captivated treasure hunters, scholars, and the faithful for 2 millennia. The historical trail, while faint, offers some tantalizing clues. After being paraded through Rome, the treasures were almost certainly deposited in the Templum Passus, or Temple of Peace, a vast repository built by Emperor Vespasian to house the plunder from his various campaigns. They likely remained there on public display for centuries, a permanent monument to Roman supremacy. The next major historical pivot point comes in the year 410, when the Visigoths under Alaric sacked Rome itself. Some theories suggest the treasures were among the vast loot taken by the Goths, eventually making their way to their capital in Toulouse. This theory, however, creates more questions than answers, as there is no definitive evidence to confirm the temple vessels were part of this haul. A more compelling and well-documented turn in the story involves the Eastern Roman, or Byzantine, Empire. In the 6th century, the renowned historian Procopius recorded that the Vandal general Gaiseric, after sacking Rome in 455, took the temple treasures to Carthage. Their stay in North Africa was brief. Just decades later, the Byzantine general Belisarius, after crushing the Vandal kingdom, recaptured the spoils and brought them to Constantinople, the new capital of the Roman Empire. According to Procopius, Belisarius made the fateful decision to parade the Jewish treasures through the streets of Constantinople during his own triumph. The Byzantine Emperor Justinian I, initially pleased, was soon persuaded by a fearful Jewish courtier that possessing these sacred objects had brought ruin to every empire that had held them: Rome, the Vandals, and now potentially Constantinople. Seeing a dangerous omen, Justinian immediately ordered the treasures to be sent back to Jerusalem to be placed in a Christian church. And here, on the road back to their home, the historical record goes completely, utterly dark. They were never recorded as arriving. This is the last solid mention of the temple treasures in any ancient chronicle, and their fate after this point is one of history's greatest unsolved mysteries. This disappearance has given rise to a spectrum of theories, ranging from the plausible to the fantastical. One persistent legend suggests the treasures never left Rome at all, that they were hidden away in the labyrinthine vaults beneath the Vatican. While an enticing idea, there is no credible evidence to support it, and the Vatican has consistently denied any knowledge of their whereabouts. Another theory posits that they were lost at sea during the voyage back to Jerusalem, sinking to the bottom of the Mediterranean in a shipwreck, their golden glow forever extinguished in the deep. Perhaps the most intriguing possibility is that they did indeed make it back to the Holy Land, only to be hidden once more, not by Romans but by Jewish priests or patriots who had foreseen the temple's destruction. Could they be sealed in a forgotten cave or tunnel beneath the Temple Mount or somewhere in the Judean desert, waiting for the day of restoration? This idea fuels modern exploration and continues to capture the Jewish imagination. The mystery is amplified by the powerful symbolism these objects hold. For many, the search is not merely an archaeological pursuit but a spiritual one. The recovery of the temple vessels is intrinsically linked to messianic hopes and the prophecy of a rebuilt third temple. They are not relics of a dead past but artifacts of a promised future. This deep yearning ensures that the search will never truly end. Every few years, a new claim or theory surfaces, from vague whispers about their location in a Persian cave to speculative connections with other famous lost treasures. Each lead is pursued with a passion that transcends academic curiosity, driven by a 2,000-year-old hope for redemption and return. The Arch of Titus remains a powerful, silent witness. The menorah carved there is a ghost, a captured image of something that was lost, a permanent question mark etched in stone. The ultimate fate of the golden menorah and the sacred trumpets may never be known. They exist now in the realm of legend, a permanent absence that somehow feels more powerful than any presence, a lost treasure that continues to define a people's longing for their past and their faith in what is yet to come. From the tiny, discarded seal impressions that name the courtiers of ancient kings to the colossal fortifications that withstood the might of empires, the story of Jerusalem is truly written in stone, clay, and gold. Each of these 30 cryptic items is far more than a museum piece. It is a unique key crafted by time itself, designed to unlock a different door into the city's impossibly layered past. Some artifacts, like the Pontius Pilate inscription, provide a solid anchor in the shifting sands of history, confirming the existence of figures we once knew only from texts. Others, like the Gabriel Revelation Stone, deepen the mysteries they were meant to solve, pulling us into a whirlpool of theological debate and ancient apocalyptic fervor. And then there are those profoundly personal objects, the Javati gold hoard hidden in a moment of pure panic, the tender Ottoman love letters concealed within a wall, that bypass kings and empires entirely to connect us heart to heart with the hopes, fears, and loves of a single individual who walked these same streets centuries ago. What makes this collection so powerful is its breathtaking diversity of scale and story. We have marveled at monumental engineering like Hezekiah's Tunnel, a city-saving project born of desperation and brilliant foresight. We have held our breath over the smallest of details, like the microscopic writing on the Ketef Hinnom amulets, which pushed the timeline of the Bible's written tradition back by hundreds of years. We have stood in the shadow of the broad wall, a testament to a king's desperate gamble that paid off, and we have descended into the damp darkness to see the Roman gladius, a solitary weapon that tells a story of intimate, personal violence amidst a city's catastrophic fall. This is the grand narrative of Jerusalem, a story that cannot be told through any single discovery, but only through the accumulation of these countless fragments, each one adding its own indispensable piece to the grand unfolding puzzle. Ultimately, these objects achieve something miraculous. They collapse time. They allow us to hear the triumphant shout of miners breaking through rock, to feel the pious devotion of a pilgrim filling their clay ampulla with sacred oil, to sense the cold fear of a family hiding their life savings as enemy soldiers storm the gates. They transform historical figures from distant, legendary names into real people who pressed seals into clay, walked paved streets, and sought comfort in their faith. This connection across the millennia is the true treasure unearthed here, a reminder that humanity, in all its complexity, ambition, and fragility, has not changed so very much. The journey through these 30 mysteries is one we've taken together, and now I'm incredibly curious to hear your thoughts. Which of these cryptic items captured your imagination the most? Was it the earth-shattering implication of the James Ossuary, the intimate faith of the Ketef Hinnom amulets, or the terrifying finality of the heel bone from a crucifixion victim? Share your favorite discovery in the comments below and tell me why it resonated with you. Let's keep the conversation going, because the history of Jerusalem is a story that belongs to all of us, and its next chapter is waiting just beneath the surface. If these glimpses into Jerusalem's layered past have sparked your curiosity, you definitely won't want to miss what's coming next. Our channel is your gateway to unraveling history's greatest puzzles, from lost civilizations to enigmatic artifacts waiting to tell their stories. Make sure you're part of the adventure by hitting that like button, subscribing to the channel, and tapping the notification bell so you never miss a discovery. For those eager to dive even deeper right now, check out the videos we've selected for you on screen. They're packed with further explorations into the archaeological wonders of the Holy Land. And if you ever have the chance, I can't recommend enough a journey to Jerusalem yourself. There is simply nothing like standing before the actual stones of Hezekiah's tunnel, seeing the Isaiah bulla under the museum lights, or walking the path of the ancient Herodian Street to experience firsthand the awe of connecting with history that until now has